Stay with us. We're back right after this.
One click.
Freedom is the glory of God. Democracy is its birthright, and our vote matters.
Technology. It also appears to have a classy look that may be able to disguise the fact that you're huffing pork belly fumes. You can try to score a free mask by registering at breathablebacon.com. You have until October 28th to do so. Just maybe don't take breathable bacon to the grocery store unless you don't mind coming home with several packs of the breakfast meat. We all know you're not supposed to play with your food, but this might be one reasonable exception. It's a combination of food and fun, the result of a collaboration between Kraft Heinz and game publisher Big G Creative. The new Kraft Heinz Variety Game Pack features games inspired by Jell-O gelatin, Kraft macaroni and cheese, and Heinz ketchup. Each of the 3 games is packaged like the food product. They're designed for ages 8 and older and take about 20 minutes to play. The Kraft Heinz Variety Game Pack costs $19.99 and is available exclusively at Target stores and Target.com. When we come back, Tyler will have a last look at the forecast.
Eric, Vanessa, and Aaron, weekday mornings on Dakota News Now.
For over 14 years, Batfitter has been making strides against breast cancer with your help. And this year, we continue to support the American Cancer Society by donating a portion of all October sales, raising funds for research, and helping to fund hope.
N-E, Vanna, we'll get some of those letters up there.
BNSF Railway. The Ford Foundation.
Continue to work on these priorities, bringing people together.
Actually to transpire, but they are
in about 20 seconds, Senator.
No, they do. This isn't a normal criminal investigation where if they investigate somebody and they find nothing, they completely keep that confidential. This is wrongdoing in the political realm, and the American public really deserve to know the truth.
No one way or the other. Absolutely. Senator, thank you very much. Sorry we're so quick tonight. Senator Ron Johnson.
Good night.
More of the story right after this.
You may know Mount Rushmore, but that's only the beginning of South Dakota's beauty. Mountain carvings and breathtaking landscapes are just some of what's waiting to be discovered. When the time is right for you, our great places are open for adventure. I'm Governor Kristi Noem. Now more than ever, those great places can bring us together. And I can promise you, it'll be a vacation to remember. To learn how to explore South Dakota safely, visit our website.
Joe Biden was raised with middle-class values. Joe doesn't need to be the center of attention or see himself on TV. He has always focused on getting the job done. Joe led us out of the 2008 recession and increased health coverage for millions. As president, Joe will focus on getting us out of our crises. He'll listen to experts, work across the aisle, and put the American people first. FFPAC is responsible for the content of this ad.
Nutritious prepared meals made by chefs and ready in 3 minutes.
Watch what they do, not what they say.
You're watching MSNBC.
So I think you've pretty much gotten the message that there is a lot at stake in this election as we head toward the end of round 1 when we start counting votes on November 3rd. Rounds 2 and maybe 3, the undemocratic rounds that have to do with lawsuits and the Electoral College. Well, the more votes that get on the books before November 3rd, the less painful and dangerous those rounds will be. Literally everything is at stake right now, y'all. Literally everything. Our basic right to vote ever again. Whether the last shreds of the Voting Rights Act will fall, or whether we can rebuild the act that John Lewis bled for, that's at stake. whether or not 20 million people and more than 7 million with pre-existing conditions, including everyone who has had coronavirus, whether they'll lose their health care, that's at stake. Whether or not thousands of little kids who fled here from Central America with their families will ever see their parents again, that's at stake. Whether or not our friends and loved ones' same-sex marriages will remain legal in all 50 states, and LGBT civil rights in general, and whether women will lose the right to control what happens to our own bodies is at stake. Whether or not poverty and want will continue to overtake this country with an out-of-control pandemic, wrecking small businesses, driving millions into unemployment, and pushing people into the street after losing the roofs over their heads, all at stake. And our lives are literally at stake in this election because of COVID. So go to planyourvote.org and please check your voter registration deadlines. Tomorrow is the last day to register in Nebraska. Sunday is the last day in Illinois. And Monday, October 19th, is a big one, the last day for voters in South Dakota, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Alabama to sign up.
Election, but as you said, he's doing a town hall tonight in Miami, another rally tomorrow in Ocala. So at the end of the week, he has spent 3 days of the last 5 here in Florida. But the reason is this: he knows that he needs to sort of distract and change the subject from coronavirus. But Aaron, the voters we talked to here this week say every time they see him at a rally that they are reminded of this. The key here are the voters who may not have turned out in 2016. That's where all those senior volunteers were out door knocking, trying to get those voters engaged. No question the president has so many strong supporters here still.
With the First Alert weather app.
Good evening from the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia. Our town hall with Joe Biden starts right now.
This is an ABC News 2020 event special.
Donald Trump in the arena, his first primetime network appearance since falling ill with coronavirus.
I'm feeling great. I don't know about you. How's everyone feeling?
Racial injustice dominating this election. Final voting is just 19 days away. Tonight, voters in a key battleground state put their questions directly to former Vice President Joe Biden.
With just 19 days to go, the president makes his case.
My goal is to fight for you and fight for your family.
From NBC News, Decision 2020, President Trump Town Hall. Live from the Perez Art Museum in Miami, here's Savannah Guthrie.
Hi, everybody, and good evening. It's good to have you with us, and welcome to Miami and our town hall with President Donald Trump.
For President Trump, some are still undecided, and we're going to try to take questions from as many of them as we can tonight. And we're going to start with Nicholas Fedden. He's from Jenkintown, Pennsylvania. That's close to here in Philadelphia.
The president then said he would not participate in a virtual debate. At that point, Joe Biden scheduled a town hall tonight in Pennsylvania on another network, and now the president is doing the same, his own town hall, with the same venue, format, and time as NBC's town hall with Joe Biden last week. So the two candidates go head-to-head tonight, though not face-to-face, each in a key battleground state. And tonight, the president will be taking questions from voters here in Miami, who we should mention are so...
Following the science have meant in terms of actual policy. And then, looking forward, what would your administration do in terms of following the science with real concrete policies that haven't been done by the current administration?
Well, first of all, going back, the fact is that the president was informed how dangerous this virus was.
27.
Thank you.
Do you have any remaining symptoms from COVID?
Nothing whatsoever. I'm great. I feel good. Was in North Carolina today and did a big rally. We had tremendous turnout, and just feel really good. Florida, Pennsylvania, we're all over the place. It's been great.
You received some treatments that are generally reserved for those with the most severe form of the disease.
Yeah.
How severe were your symptoms? In particular, did you have pneumonia?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I didn't feel good. I didn't feel strong. I had a little bit of a temperature. The doctors at the White House are fantastic, as you can imagine, and they really did.
serious it was when he did an interview with Bob Woodward. And at the time, he said he didn't tell anybody because he was afraid Americans would panic. Americans don't panic, he panicked. He didn't say a word to anybody. Then I wrote a piece in March about what I thought we should be doing to take hold of this, using there's an act that's passed a long time ago that allows the president to go into a business and say, stop making this and start making that. And it took a long time for him to even institute that, to get ventilators and so on. And so the point was, he missed enormous opportunities and kept saying things that weren't true. It's going to go away by Easter. Don't worry about it. It's going to all, when the summer comes, it's all going to go away like a miracle.
We can clear it up.
And there shouldn't.
Your first positive test was Thursday, October 1st, okay? When was your last negative test? When did you last remember having a negative test?
Well, I test quite a bit, and I can tell you that before the debate, which I thought was a very good debate, and I felt fantastically. I had no problem before.
Did you test the day of the debate?
I don't know. I don't even remember. I test all the time. But I can tell you this. After the debate, like I guess a day or so, I think it was Thursday evening, maybe even late Thursday evening, I tested positive. That's when I first found out about it.
Back to the debate, because the debate commission's rules, it was the honor system, would be that you would come with a negative test. You say you don't know if you got a test on the day of the debate?
I have no problem. Again, the doctors do it. I don't ask them. I test all the time. And
did you take a test, though, on the day of the debate?
You know, if you ask the doctor, they'll give you a perfect answer. But they take a test, and I leave, and I go about my business.
Did you take a test on the day of the debate, I guess, is the bottom line?
I probably did, and I took a test the day before and the day before, and I was always in great shape, and I was in great shape for the debate.
Done because he kept worrying, in my view, about the stock market. He worried if he talked about how bad this could be unless we took these precautionary actions, then in fact the market would go down. And his barometer of success in the economy is the market. Thirdly, what we didn't do is the president had an opportunity to open and allow schools and businesses to stay open if they got the kind of help they needed. So the Congress passed a couple $1 trillion worth of help. And what happened was most of that money, significant portion of that money, went to the very wealthiest corporations.
Let's talk about the event that was held at the White House on the Saturday before you tested positive. Subsequent to that, 13 people connected to that event tested positive. There was an outdoor reception. You've seen the pictures. There was an indoor reception. People were not wearing masks. My question to you is, at this point in the pandemic, knowing what we know, shouldn't you have known better? Shouldn't the White House know better than to hold an event like that?
Well, they do a lot of testing in the White House. They test everybody, including me, but they test everybody. And something happened, but as far as the mask is concerned, I'm good with masks. I'm okay with masks. I tell people wear masks. But just the other day, they came out with a statement that 85% of the people that wear masks catch it. So
they didn't say that. I know that study.
That's what I heard, and that's what I saw. And regardless, but everybody's tested, and they're tested often. And I also knew that, hey, I'm president. I have to see people. I can't be in a basement. I can't be in a room. I have to be out.
You can see people with a mask, though, right?
I can, but people with masks are catching it all the time. I mean, if you look at the governor of Virginia, he was known for a mask. If you
and not touch the economy. For example, I laid out a plan how you can open businesses. You can open businesses and schools if, in fact, you provide them the guidance that they need as well as the money to be able to do it. What's happening now is we know, for example, if you can open a business and you could have a sign on the door saying safe to come in, that's why people aren't going anyway when they're open, and say because you have social distancing, you have plastic barriers, when you go to the cashier, you have separators between the booths, you don't have large crowds, you reduce the size, the number of people you can have in the restaurant, you make sure there's testing. That's a really critical piece that he didn't do.
Incredible people, and they came up to me and they would hug me and they would touch me, and I'm not going to not let them do it.
Now there was an event with the Gold Star families the day after the Supreme Court event. A Gold Star event with the most incredible people you've ever seen, and I could have chosen not to talk to them or to keep everybody away, and you know what? And I don't think that's probably where it was caught, but maybe it was. I was going to say, you bring it up. You brought it up yourself. I mean, are you trying to suggest that? Do you believe a grieving military family gave you COVID?
No, I don't know where it came from.
Okay.
And you don't know where it came from, and the doctors don't know where it came from. But as the president, I have to be out there. I also know...
Well, there's no one that says you can't be out there, but it's just about wearing masks and having, for example, your
Well, I know
rallies.
this.
Your rallies
As
don't
an
require
example,
masks.
No, I mean, let's see Kamala. She's got people now that people have it, and I'm not blaming her. I'm not saying, oh, she did a terrible thing. As president, I have to be out there. I can't be in a basement. I can't be locked in a very beautiful room someplace in the White House. And I want to see the Gold Star families, and I want to see everybody. And I also...
Republican, voted for Donald Trump in 2016, undecided now.
Hey, Kelly, how are you?
Hi, Mr. Biden. My question is about the coronavirus vaccine,
Yes.
or potential. Senator Harris stated that she absolutely would not take a vaccine from President Trump. And of course, we all know it's not President Trump that would create this vaccine. It would be doctors and scientists that presumably we all trust. So my question for you is, if a vaccine were approved between now and the end of the year, would you take it? And if you were to become president, would you mandate that everyone has to take it?
Two things. Number one, President Trump talks about things that just aren't accurate about everything from vaccines, we're going to have one right away, it's going to happen, and so on. The point is that if the body of scientists say that this is what is ready to be done, and it's been tested, it's gone through the 3 phases, yes, I would take it, I'd encourage people to take it. But President Trump says things like, everything from this crazy stuff he's walking away from now, inject bleach in your arm and that's going to work. I'm not being facetious though. I mean, he's actually said these things. And now Regeneron is the answer. That's going to cure everything. There's 500,000 doses. We got a couple, we got more than a few million people.
Things that we're looking at, like in this case, Regeneron, and Eli Lilly makes something that's supposed to be incredible. And I think that maybe I wouldn't be doing this discussion with you right now. We have therapies now, and cures, maybe you can use the word cure, but we have therapies that are absolutely incredible.
I want to pick up on something you just said. You said we're rounding the corner.
I believe we're rounding the corner.
Now, 10% of the country approximately has had COVID. That means 80, 90%, let's do the math, is still vulnerable.
Right.
There's been some talk, including from the White House lately, that perhaps it approves of what's called herd immunity. That's where you basically just let young people and everybody get sick. You try to protect the old people and those who are sick, and hopefully it gets up to a certain level, and now we're all immune. So let's just be clear about it. It also means more deaths. Do you support herd immunity as a strategy? Essentially just let people get sick.
The cure cannot be worse than the problem itself. We did the right thing. We were expected to lose 2,200,000 people and maybe more than that. We're at 210,000 people. One person is too much. It should have never happened because of China. It happened because of China.
Yes. The answer is, depending on how clear, there's vaccines, they say, have a very positive impact, and they're going to affect positively 85% of the American public. Or there's others say this vaccine is really the key. This is the golden key. It depends on the state of the nature of the vaccine, when it comes out, and how it's being distributed. That would depend on. But I would think that we should be talking about, depending on the continuation of the spread of the virus, we should be thinking about making it mandatory.
How could you enforce that?
Well, you couldn't. That's the problem. Just like you can't enforce measles. You can't come to school unless you have a measles shot. You can't. But you can't say everyone has to do this. But you would, just like you can't mandate a mask. But you can say you can go to every governor and get them all in a room, all 50 of them as president, and say, ask people to wear the mask. Everybody knows.
And if they don't?
Fine. And they don't? No, not fine. Then I go to every governor, I go to every mayor, I go to every councilman, I go to every local official. Say, mandate the mask. Say, this is what you have to do when you're out. Make sure you encourage it being done. Look, George, you and I know, and I think you do too as well, the words of a president matter.
Absolutely.
No matter whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, they matter. And when a president...
We were supposed to, as mentioned, be watching you on a debate stage right now. We're not doing that, so let's clear up a few things from the last one. You were asked point blank to denounce white supremacy. In the moment, You didn't. You asked some follow-up questions. Who specifically? A couple of days later, on a different show, you denounced white supremacy.
No,
My question to you is,
you've done this to
why
me and
does
everybody.
it seem like
I denounce white supremacy? Okay,
You did
I
2 days
denounced
later.
white supremacy for years, but you always do it. You always start off with a question. You didn't ask Joe Biden whether or not he denounces Antifa. I watched him on the same basic show with Lester Holt, and he was asking questions like Biden was a child.
Well, so this is a little bit of a dodge.
Are you listening? I denounce white supremacy.
Okay.
What's your next question?
Do you feel, it feels sometimes you're hesitant to do so, like you wait a beat.
Here we go again. Every time, in fact, my people came, I'm sure they'll ask you the white supremacy question. I denounce white supremacy.
Okay.
And frankly, you want to know something? I denounce Antifa, and I denounce these people on the left that are burning down our cities that are run by Democrats who don't know what they're doing.
While we're denouncing, let me ask you about QAnon. It is this theory that Democrats are a satanic pedophile ring and that you are the savior of that. Now, can you just once and for all state that that is completely not true and disavow QAnon in its entirety?
I know nothing about QAnon.
I just told you.
I know very little. You told me, but what you tell me doesn't necessarily make it fact. I hate to say that. I know nothing about it. I do know they...
The majority of workers, I would argue not enough. What is your plan for either extending the tax cuts for the middle class or creating a new plan that further reduces those taxes?
I carry this card with me. When I said the Trump tax cuts, about 1.3 trillion of the $2 trillion in his tax cuts went to the top 1/10 of 1%. That's what I'm talking about eliminating, not all the tax cuts that are out there. And by the way, if you just take a look, we reduced the corporate tax rate from 35%, and Democrats and Republicans who were in office thought it should come down to 28%. He reduced it to 21%. You have 91 out of every of the Fortune 500 companies not paying a single solitary penny. If you raise the corporate tax just back to 28%, which is a fair tax, you'd raise $1.3 trillion by that one act.
Pedophile cult
no
being run
idea.
by.
I know
You
nothing
don't know
about
that? Okay.
No, I don't know
You
that.
just
and
this
neither
week.
do you know that.
Okay, just this week
Why
you
aren't
retweeted.
you asking me about Antifa? Why aren't you asking me
Because you
about
just-
the radical left?
because you're
Why aren't
volunteering
you
it.
asking Joe Biden questions about why doesn't he condemn Antifa? Why does he say it doesn't exist?
Because you're here before
Antifa,
me.
no, so cute. Antifa exists. They're vicious, they're violent, they kill people, and they're burning down our cities. And they happen to be radical left.
Just this week, you retweeted to your 87 million followers a conspiracy theory that Joe Biden orchestrated to have SEAL Team 6, the Navy SEAL Team 6, killed to cover up the fake death of bin Laden. Now, why would you send a lie like that to your followers? You retweeted
That
it.
was a retweet. That was an opinion of somebody, and that was a retweet. I'll put it out there. People can decide for themselves. I
You're
don't
the
take a
president.
position.
You're not like someone's crazy uncle who can just retweet whatever.
That was a retweet, and I do a lot of retweets. And frankly, because the media is so fake and so corrupt, if I didn't have social media, I don't call it Twitter, I call it social media, I wouldn't be able to get the word out. And the word is and you know what the word is? The word is very simple. We're building our country stronger and better than it's ever been before. And that's what's happening. And everybody...
Everything moves. Everything moves. Right now you got the opposite. You had last year, during this pandemic, you had the wealthiest billionaires in the world, in the nation. They made another $700 billion. $700 billion. He talks about a V-shaped recovery. It's a K-shaped recovery. If you're on the top, you're going to do very well. And the other thing and if you're in the bottom, or you're in the middle or the bottom, your income is coming down. You're not getting a raise. I don't know what you do. You may get a raise. I hope you're a billionaire. But all kidding aside, but it's about growing the economy. And George, the way out, the reason why I'm so optimistic about economic recovery, more than I've ever been, is we have these 4 crises happening all at once, and one helps the other. For example, we're going to invest a great deal of that money into infrastructure and into a green infrastructure. We're going to put 500,000 charging stations on new highways we're building and old highways we're building. We're going to own the electric market. You know as well as I do from your days, you know, in the old days, where the president spends about $600 billion a year on government contracts. Everything from making sure they have aircraft carriers to automobile fleets for the in the United States.
Elected sitting president, and then they talk about, will you accept a peaceful transfer? And the answer is yes, I will. But I want it to be an honest election, and so does everybody else. When I see thousands of ballots dumped in a garbage can and they happen to have my name on it, I'm not happy about that.
But just those are there is in fact no evidence of widespread fraud, and you were sowing doubt about our democracy.
How can you say that? You do read newspapers.
I do.
You do watch the news.
Yes,
I know you read the news, but you watch it.
I do.
Because every day they're talking about ballots that are corrupt, that are fraudulent.
And millions that are being processed right now.
But you can win a race. Take a look at me. You can win a race by 1%.
But why are you laying the groundwork for that right now? It's like if I go play tennis with my husband and I say my ankle's hurting right now.
I don't want that to happen. Savannah, I want it to be clean. I really feel we're going to win. But I want this to be clean. But it's sort of ironic that you and them talk about the peaceful transfer when I spent 3.5 years fighting off these maniacs, and now it turns out, everything's there, that they were the ones that dealt with Russia. And it's too bad. But peaceful transfer, I absolutely want that. But ideally, I don't want to transfer because I want to win.
The United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility.
Between y'all, you are leading Biden. She voted for Clinton in 2016. She's registered as an independent. Jacqueline, what's your question for the president? And you hold the mic up close and take off your mic because it's hard to hear out here.
Good evening.
How are you?
Welcome to Miami.
Thank you very much. It's beautiful.
Mr. President, if you knew COVID-19, as you told Bob Woodward in February.
As what?
As you told Bob Woodward in February, was airborne and deadlier than the flu, why did you only put in place a travel ban from China and not put in place other measures mitigating the spread of COVID-19, potentially saving tens of thousands of American lives?
Well, I did put it in very early, as you know. Joe Biden was 2 months behind me, and he called me xenophobic and racist and everything else because I put it in. And it turned out that I was 100% right. I also put it on Europe very early because I saw there was a lot of infection in Europe. And it's sort of an amazing question, and I appreciate the question and respect the question, but the news doesn't get out the right answer because I put on a travel ban far earlier than Dr. Fauci thought it was necessary, who I like, far earlier than the scientists. I was actually the only one that wanted to put it on, and I did it actually against the advice of a lot of people, including Nancy Pelosi, who had no clue what she was doing. At the end of January, when I put on the travel ban, Joe Biden and others said, this is ridiculous, you don't do that. Well, Dr. Fauci said I saved thousands and thousands of lives.
Did you?
I was early. I was extremely early when I put on the travel ban.
Can I ask you, did your national security advisor on January 28th in the Oval Office warn you that this would be the greatest national security risk of your administration? He didn't say, or you don't remember?
I read it someplace. Maybe Woodward said it or something. But no, he did not say that. But I knew it was a big threat. At the same time, I don't want to panic this country. I don't want to go out and say everybody's going to die. Everybody's
Isn't there a middle ground? You don't have to mislead, but you can.
No, there's not a middle ground. You have to be safe, you have to be vigilant, and you have to be smart.
You're going to like this next couple of voters. It's a mom and a daughter.
Good.
Mom, Barbara, voted for you in 2016. She's leaning to vote for you again. Now, her daughter was too young to vote last time. She's going to vote for her first time in a presidential campaign, and she is leaning Biden. So imagine the dinner table at their house, okay? So, Barbara, why don't you go first and ask your question?
Bienvenido a Miami.
Thank you.
Mr. Trump, as a frontline ER doctor working through the coronavirus pandemic, I know firsthand, and I've seen that many hospitals throughout the United States are suffering financial hardships. These economic effects are trickling down to the frontline workers. We are being, across the country, frontline workers are being fired, they're being furloughed, our salaries are being cut. And this is also happening in other economic sectors as well, including the travel industry and hospitality.
Right.
My question to you is, how are you going to get the United States back on track, both in terms of the economy and the pandemic?
So it's happening. We just set a record, 11.4 million jobs. We are going to have a phenomenal third quarter, which will be announced.
Are back on ABC.
Third day, where I think you're going to see a red wave. But we're going to have a tremendous announcement, I believe. I mean, we're going to find out. But GDP is going through the roof. Jobs, real estate, houses, so many things are happening. So people were saying we're going to have a 42% unemployment. Look, this was a thing that came into our country, and it happened more than 100 years ago, and it happened now. They were talking about a 42% unemployment rate.
Who was talking about that? I heard 20%.
It just came out at 7.8% unemployment, and people can't even believe it. Our economy is going to be, next year, if we don't have somebody that raises taxes and quadruples taxes, which they want to do and kills everything, our economy is going to be phenomenal next year.
Question now from Cedric Humphrey. He's a student from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, progressive Democrat.
Don't jump, Cedric. You look like you're way up there.
Okay. Thank you, George. And good evening, former Vice President Biden. Many people believe that the true swing demographic in this election will be black voters under the age of 30. Not because they'll be voting for Trump, but because they won't vote at all. I myself have had this exact same conflict. So my question for you then is, besides you ain't black, what do you have to say to young black voters who see voting for you as further participation in a system that continually fails to protect them?
Well, I'd say, first of all, as my buddy John Lewis said, it's a sacred opportunity to right to vote. You can make a difference. If young black women and men vote, you can determine the outcome of this election. Not a joke. You can do that. And the next question is, am I worthy of your vote? Can I earn your vote? And the answer is, there's two things I think that I care, and I've demonstrated I care about my whole career. One is, in addition to dealing with a criminal justice system to make it fair and make it more decent, we have to be able to put black Americans in a position to be able to gain wealth, generate wealth. And so you look at what that entails. It entails everything from early education. That's why I'm supporting making sure that we in Title I schools, as you know, schools with the least tax base to be able to support their schools. I increased the funding for them from 15 to $45 billion. That allows every teacher in that school to make up to $60,000. And the problem now is they're leaving the schools. They're not there. We're short about 1.5 million teachers, 1.25 million teachers. Number two, every 3-, 4-, and 5-year-old will go to school, not daycare, school. And all the great universities, including the one you've gone to, go to, or went to, in fact, talks about in the last 8 years what's happened. What happens when you let them go to school, they make up rapidly whatever shortcoming they had in terms of their education prior to that. They have not heard as many words spoken, et cetera, et cetera. What happens is that the studies show that 58% will increase by 58% their chance of going all through 12 years of school and going through successfully. We'll also provide for the ability to bring in social workers and school psychologists. We have one school psychologist in America now for every 1,507 kids. It should be 1 to 500, not just in schools that are poor, but in all schools. Because we learned that, for example, drug abuse doesn't cause mental illness. Mental illness causes drug abuse, the failure to get hold of people and deal with their anxieties. In addition to that, I provide for $70 billion for HBCUs for them to be able to have the wherewithal to do what other universities can do because they don't have.
We're on the same side.
Let's take a break. We're going to get more questions right after this.
Secret are where most of the major inventions come out of. And so that school now will be able to produce young black women and men who are going to go into a field of the future that's burgeoning, cybersecurity. And that's what's going to help a great deal. In addition to that, if you're a young man about to graduate or you graduated from school and you want to own your first home, well, it's awful hard to get the money, depending on the background, what your economic background is to get a down payment. So we're going to guarantee first-term home buyers a $15,000 down payment for first-term home buyers. In addition to that, what all the studies now show, and I've been arguing this for a long time, is young black entrepreneurs are just as successful as white entrepreneurs or anyone else, given a shot. But you can't get the money. Where do you go to get the startup money? So what President Obama and I did, we had a program where we took $1.5 billion and we invested it in all the SBAs around the country, in the state SBAs, small business associations, and that generated $30 billion came off the sideline, because if you have a guarantee of $200,000 for your new startup enterprise, young entrepreneur, you're going to be able to attract, if it's government money as a guarantee, you'll be able to attract another $100,000. It generated $30 billion. Well, I'm changing that program, and I'll get this done without much trouble, I believe, in the Congress, from $1.5 billion to $30 billion to $30 billion. That'll take $300 billion off the sideline and grow, because you know. And for example, if you, in fact, and I were the same age, and we split our differences and we were the same age, and we went to the same builder to buy us each the same home, but my home was in a white neighborhood on one side of a highway, and yours is in a black neighborhood. Same exact home. Your home will start off being valued 29% less than my home. Yet your insurance for that home will be higher. You'll be taxed more for it. We've got to end this. That's what got me involved in politics in the first place, a thing called redlining. We can change so much, that we can do so much to change the circumstances to give people a real opportunity.
Cedric, did you hear what you needed?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, do you hear what you needed to hear?
I think so.
Okay.
Well, there's a lot more. If you're going to hang around afterwards, I'll tell you more.
Okay.
Let's get No, but I really mean it. It is the key. Look, this is the way every other. How do most, like my dad? He lost his job up in Scranton, and it took him 3 years to be able to move down to Delaware, to Claymont, Delaware, a little steel town, and sent us home to our grandpop to live with him. We finally got back. We lived in apartments, became 6 and 8 housing. Much later it wasn't. It was just normal apartments. But it took him 5 years to be able to buy a home. Well, we bought a 3-bedroom home with 4 kids and a grandpop living with us, but it accumulated wealth. You built up wealth. That's how middle-class folks make it. They build up wealth. Then he was able to borrow a little against that to be able to help us get to school, those kinds of things. It's about accumulating wealth. And you're behind an 8 ball. The vast majority of people of color are behind an 8 ball. And it's the same way what's going on now with all this money that's been voted. What's happened? You go to the bank, if you're a black businessman, and the president fired the only inspector general to oversee all this help coming from the Congress. And what happens? You go in and they say, do you have an account here? No. Do you have a credit card with this? No. Have you borrowed from us before? No. We bail these suckers out. They're not liable for any of the money, but they still won't rent it. They still won't lend it to you. We got to change that. It's about accumulating wealth.
Want to get another question in here from Angelica?
And now you could actually say it's not Obamacare, because that's how big it was, where you had to pay a fortune for the privilege of not having to pay for bad health insurance. So we got rid of that. That was a big, big thing. And by doing that, and we will always have, by the way, we're always protecting people with pre-existing conditions, and I can't say that more strongly. But we've been able to bring health care costs way down. Now, I took over Obamacare, got rid of the individual mandate, made it good, managed it much better. Remember, they had the $5 billion website disaster and all of the problems they had. The problem with Obamacare, it's not good. We'd like to terminate it, and we want a much less expensive health care that's a much better health care, and that's where we're aiming. And if we can do that, and we have a very good chance of doing it, but we've also brought down the price of Obamacare. Problem with Obamacare, it basically is never going to be great, and I want to give great health care.
Mr. President, I got to
thank you very much.
On the pre-existing conditions. This is such a big issue for voters.
It is a big issue for me, too.
In point of fact, your administration is about to go to the Supreme Court to argue to throw out the rest of Obamacare, which includes the protections for pre-existing conditions.
That's right.
So your administration is in court right now trying to get rid of that protection.
In order to replace it with a much better health care at a much lower price and always, under all circumstances, we are going to protect the Republicans. And I mean, maybe I changed the party a lot over the last 3 years, but we will protect people with pre-existing conditions. And Savannah, what I want to do, get rid of the terrible Obamacare. I've already done it to a large extent because, as you know, the individual mandate is gone. That was the worst part.
You repealed, but you haven't replaced. Now, you've been in office almost 4 years.
What we have done.
You had both houses of Congress, Senate and House, in Republican hands, and there is not a replacement yet.
That's right. I'm sorry, but if you look, we had both houses, and what did we do? We got rid of the individual mandate.
But
that went through the legislature.
The promise was repeal and replace.
Look, we should be
for the same crime. What I had done as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, took the 10 circuit courts of appeals, took some really brilliant lawyers working for me in judiciary. We did a study, and we determined what happens if, for the first, second, third offense, for any crime in the criminal justice system, at the federal level, if you're a black man, it's the first time you committed robbery. How long would you go to jail on average? If you're a white man, how long? Black man would go to jail on average 13 years, white man 2 years. I go down the list of every single crime. So we set up a sentencing commission. We didn't set the time. Every single solitary maximum was reduced in there. But what happened was, it became the same time for the same crime. So it said you have to serve between 1 and 3 years. It ended up becoming much lower. Black folks went to jail a lot less than they would have before, but it was a mistake.
Let me ask another follow-up on the crime bill. It also funded 100,000 police back in 1994. You've often said that more cops clearly mean less crime. Do you still believe that?
Yes, if in fact they're involved in community policing, not jump squads. For example, when
we should have a stimulus, and I want a stimulus. The Republicans will approve a stimulus. The problem is she doesn't want to do it because she thinks it's bad for her election. The fact is she's wrong because people know she's in our way. She's not approving it. She doesn't appreciate our people, and she doesn't appreciate at all our workers. Nancy Pelosi, we are ready to sign and pass stimulus, but she's got to...
People do not love the back and forth of Washington, but this has been a roller coaster. Back in early October, you one day tweeted, no more negotiations until after Election Day. I'm walking away. Then I think the next couple of days you said maybe we can do something targeted. Then you said I want a big, big bill. But then Senate Republicans said, no, we're not for that. So you're the big deal maker. How come this is so... You yourself have changed positions.
Did you ever hear of a word called negotiation? We're negotiating, okay?
But people's lives are hanging in the balance.
And you know who I'm negotiating against? Nancy Pelosi, because she doesn't want to give the money. We should have stimulus. This was not our people's fault. This was China's fault. And she's penalizing our people. I'm ready to sign a big, beautiful stimulus. You saw the other day, I say go big or go home, right?
That's what
I want it to be big. I want it to be bold. I want the money to go directly to the people.
Are Senate Republicans with you? They're going to go big?
They'll go.
Big old number?
They'll go. They're going to be
okay,
very
but so
happy.
far they have not said they would.
Because I haven't asked them to, because I can't get through Nancy Pelosi. Okay. If Nancy Pelosi and I, through my representatives or directly, I don't care, if we agree to something, the Republicans will agree to it.
Okay. Our next question comes from...
As made up of the black community and the brown community to sit down in the White House and over the next year come up with significant reforms that need to take place within communities. You have to bring them together. One of the things I've observed is, the neighborhood I grew up in Claymont, either became a cop, a firefighter, or a priest. I wasn't qualified much to do any one of them. But here's the deal, all kidding aside. Most cops don't like bad cops.
Correct.
They don't like it.
Correct.
And so what happens is they get intimidated into not reporting. So one of the things we do is there has to be transparency available. We have to be able to go in at the federal level, be able to go in and check out whether or not there's systematic problems within police departments. If in fact a cop needs to be tried, it's not the prosecutor in the community, in the district where there. You got to go outside the community to get another prosecutor to come in and handle the crime. There's a lot of things we've learned. And it takes time, but we can do this. You can ban chokeholds, but beyond that, you have to teach people how to de-escalate circumstances. de-escalate. So instead of anybody coming at you and the first thing you do is shoot to kill, you shoot them in the leg. There's ways you have to do more background checks in terms of whether or not the person coming in passes certain psychological test. And the last thing I'll say, and I'm sorry because it's really, I think, really, really important, is you have to be in a position where you are able to identify the things that have to change. And one of the things that has to change is so many cops get called into circumstances where somebody is mentally off, like what happened not long ago with that guy with the knife. That's why we have to provide within police departments psychologists and social workers to go out with the cops on those calls.
Your tax returns, among other things, it says that you have debts of approximately $421 million that you have personally guaranteed and that will come due in the next 4 years. The question is, on behalf of voters, who do you owe $421 million to?
First of all, let me answer. What they did is illegal, number one. Also, the numbers are all wrong with the numbers they released. And just so you understand, when you have a lot of real estate, I have real estate, you know a lot of it, okay? Right down the road, Doral, big stuff, great stuff. When I decided to run, I'm very under-levered, fortunately, but I'm very under-levered. I have a very, very small percentage of debt compared, in fact, some of it I did as favors to institutions that wanted to loan me money. $400 million compared to the assets that I have, all of these great properties all over the world, and frankly, the Bank of America building in San Francisco. I don't love what's happening to San Francisco.
Well, do I hear you right? It sounds like you're saying $400 million isn't that much.
One of the biggest office buildings.
But are you confirming that yes, you do owe some $400 million?
What I'm saying is that it's a tiny percentage of my net worth.
That sounds like
yes. And you'll see that soon because we're doing things, you know. We've given, I think it's 108 or 112 pages of financial detail to elections, and, you know, we have to file as the president, as any politician, you have to file. Nobody ever looks at that. When they do, they see how incredible the company is, but more importantly, they see where this debt is. No, I don't owe Russia money. I owe a very, very small. It's called mortgages. Yeah. People have a house.
Any foreign bank, any foreign entity?
Not that I know of, but I will probably, because it's so easy to solve, and if you'd like to do, I will let you know who I owe whatever small amount of money. I want to say two things. Number one, it's a very small amount of money. Number two, it's very straight. It's very, very straight. But it's a tiny percentage of the worth. Did you ever hear the expression under-levered?
Yeah.
I am extremely under-levered.
Here's the thing.
Passion, grit, perseverance.
I mean, that's what I understand. I think people are just wondering.
As you know,
you're the only.
It turned out that I am
yes,
underwritten.
But the IRS says
excuse me. No, but you.
The IRS says that doesn't stop you from releasing.
You accused me of not being under-audited previously, and so did other people at NBC, and I'm under-audited. So that was solved. That's good. I am under-audited. No person in their right mind would release prior to working out the deal with the IRS. And I'll go a step further. I'm treated very badly by the IRS. They treat me very, very badly. You have people in there from previous administrations. They treat me very badly. But we're under audit. It's very routine in many ways, but we're under audit. They like to change the game, change the rules, do everything. You saw what they did with the Tea Party people. You saw what they did with the religious group.
But to be clear, there is no law or rule that prohibits you from releasing your tax returns.
Except common sense and intelligence and having lawyers that say, because I would love to release them, and as soon as we come to a conclusion, I will release them, and very gladly. But if you go to elections, and if you take a look, you'll see 112, I think it's 112. It talks about the income, which is rather massive. It talks about all of the properties. They have them
2 times more biotin.
ABC Wednesday is
a feeding frenzy. This was originally when I filed it. And I file it every year. I update it every year. My son is here. They run the company. I don't run the company.
It also says that you paid $750 in taxes in the year you were elected. Is that true or not?
It's a statutory number. It's a statutory.
But is that true?
I think it's a filing number. You pay $750. It's a filing or filing fee.
Most people here probably pay more.
No, I don't know. I can tell you this. If they have my tax returns, as you know, they have to go to jail. It's illegal. But their numbers were wrong. But let me tell you what else. I don't owe money to any of these sinister people. This has been going on for years now. Russia, Russia, Russia. It turned out to be a hoax. And it turned out to be that Hillary Clinton and the Democrats were dealing with Russia, not me. It's a whole hoax. So I would not mind at all saying who it is, but it's a very small. When you look at vast properties like I have, and they're big and they're beautiful and they're well located, when you look at that, the amount of money, $400 million, is a peanut. It's extremely underlevered. And it's levered with normal banks. Not a big deal.
All right, let's take a break. We'll get more voter questions right after this.
Weekend with highs for a lot of us, dropping down into the 40s.
Josh Gad and music from the Foo Fighters. Jimmy Kimmel
estimates, all in real time. And I wake up more, well, I'm black, I'm gay, we are so dead!
Free. I'm gay. Of the United States. From the Constitution Center in Philadelphia, here again, George Stephanopoulos.
And the Supreme Court is our next topic. The questioner, Nathan Osborne of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Democrat.
Hi, George, Mr. Vice President. Hey, Nathan. Our country's first Supreme Court gave its first rulings just 2 blocks from here, from 1791 to 1800, and it's become more polarized since then. Merrick Garland didn't get a hearing for all of 2016, and Amy Coney Barrett's being pushed through at the last minute, even though millions have already voted. So what do you think about ideas from people like Pete Buttigieg and others to put in place safeguards that will help ensure more long-term balance and stability? And what do you say to LGBTQ Americans and others who are very worried right now about erosions of their rights and our democracy as a whole?
Well, let me start the last point, work my way back. I think there's great reason to be concerned. I was on the road most of the time during these hearings, so I didn't hear many of them. I just got the recaps when I'd get in late at night. I've been going around the country, Florida, and anyway. And but my reading online, what the judge said was she didn't answer very many questions at all. And I don't even think she has laid out much of a judicial philosophy in terms of the basis upon which she thinks are there unenumerated rights in the Constitution and the rest. So, number one. So I think there's great reason to be concerned for the LGBT community, something I've fought very hard for a long time to make sure there's equality across the board. Number two, I think that also healthcare overall is very much in jeopardy as a consequence of the president's going to go directly after this election directly to the Supreme Court within a month to try to get Obamacare wiped out after 10 million people have already lost their insurance from their employer and wants to take 20 million people out of the system as well, plus 100 million people with pre-existing conditions. So there's a lot at stake. I don't think it's appropriate. I think the Constitution implies, there's no provision in the Constitution. My problem is I've made a mistake of teaching constitutional law for 21 years and the separation of powers. The Constitution implies that the way the people have a right to determine who's going to be on the court is how they vote for their senators and their president. We seek the advice and consent of the Senate and the
president's president for all 4 years, isn't he?
No, he is. But once an election begins, by implication, it is inconsistent with the constitutional principles, in my view. You get disagreement among scholars on this. But I believe it's inconsistent when millions of people already voted to put someone on the court. I think it should have been held until this election is over, see what the makeup of the Senate is going to be. If the president wins this election, he should be able to.
How about that question of expanding the court?
We are live in Miami in the middle of a town hall with President Trump. Thank you again for being here. We've got another voter, Adam Shooker. He voted for Clinton in 2016. He's registered as a Democrat and says he's supporting Biden. Adam, take it away.
Thank you, Savannah. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Adam.
4 years ago, Senate leadership said it was inappropriate to push through a nominee in an election year. Yet they fast-tracked your nominee for the Supreme Court just today. The question I have for you is, what do you say to the voter that thinks it's hypocritical to act in that manner and that they can't trust Republicans' word?
So when I was elected, and when a president is elected, they're elected for a period of 4 years. And Justice Ginsburg said it best, I think, talking about President Obama having to do with somebody else, that the president is put there for 4 years, not for 3 years. So during this 4th year, it happened to come up, unfortunately, because I had great respect for Justice Ginsburg, but a vacancy happened to come up, and we picked somebody that's outstanding. She has been an absolute star, and I'm extremely proud of it. But again, plenty of time. I mean, there's plenty of time. We're going to do it before the election, but we also have much time after the election, but there's no reason to wait, because it's almost unanimous, it seems to me, certainly within the Republican Party, and frankly, most of the Democrats within closed rooms. I guarantee you that this is an outstanding person, and I'm using my 4th term. And you know, if you look at it, and if you put the shoe on the other foot, if they had this, they would do it 100%. So there's been 29 times when this has happened. All 29 times, a president has done exactly what I've done.
Could I just, to the voters' point, I'll just say that in 2016 you were on another show, actually another morning show, and you were asked whether President Obama should nominate a Supreme Court Justice Merrick Garland, and you said, I think the Senate should wait until the next president and let the president pick. Now that was 8 months before the election. This is 3 weeks before the election.
I have a lot of respect, by the way.
So you have changed your position on this.
I have a lot of respect for Judge Garland, I want to tell you that. But I'll tell you, the whole ball game changed when I saw the way they treated Justice Kavanaugh. I have never seen any human being, and I'm not just talking about Supreme Court, I have never seen a human being treated so badly with false accusations and
they're proceeding.
But don't voters have a right to know where you stand?
They do have a right to know where I stand, and they'll have a right to know where I stand before they vote.
So you'll come out with a clear position before Election Day?
Yes, depending on how they handle this. But look, what you should do is you got to make sure you vote. And vote for a senator who, in fact, reflects your general view on constitutional interpretation. And vote for a president who is more in line with you. And if you oppose the position that I would not have appointed her, but if you oppose my position, vote for Trump. Vote for a Republican who shares that view. But that's your opportunity to get involved in lifetime appointments that presidents come and go. Justices stay and stay and stay.
We have a question from a Republican, Andrew Lewis. I guess a disaffected Republican. You cast a writing vote for John Kasich in 2016. You're going to vote against President Trump this year.
And John's writing in for me, by the way.
I know that. Mr. Vice President,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Vice President, my father, Drew Lewis, served as Secretary of Transportation under President Ronald Reagan in his first term.
Oh, yeah, I'll be darned.
And some of his closest allies and friends were Democrats, including House Speaker Tip O'Neill and Senator Ted Kennedy. Sadly, today we have highly partisan and dysfunctional governance, and I believe President Trump is primarily responsible for creating this toxic environment. As president, how will you avoid the temptation to exact revenge and instead take the high road and attempt to restore bipartisanship, civility, and honor to our democracy?
As written by a fellow who won the Pulitzer Prize for a book he wrote about the presidency, he said, you know, I doubt whether Biden is really Irish. He doesn't hold a grudge. In politics, grudges don't work. They make no sense. I really mean it. I have never, and the second point I'd make is, everybody talks about, yeah, Joe, when you were a senator and a chairman of foreign relations or chairman of judiciary, you got a lot of things done. You're able to cross the aisle, but the days are changed. When you're vice president, you got a lot done, but it can't happen anymore. It can. We got to change the nature of the way we deal with one another. And it starts off by the way your father was and Tip was and others. You don't question another man or woman's motive. You can question their judgment, but not their motive. We badly need an infrastructure bill. Well, what happens? I stand up and I say, you know, we need an infrastructure bill, Senator, but I tell you what, you're in the pocket of the cement industry. But let's see what we can do. You can't get anywhere. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. I learned that lesson a long time ago. I've never, even when it's obvious on its face what the motive is, stick to the subject and listen to the other guy. Listen. What I will be doing as if I'm elected president, the first thing, and not a joke, and you can ask if they tell you your dad's old friends on the Republican side. I'm going to pick up the phone and call them and say, let's get together. We got to figure out how we're going to move forward here. Because there's so many things we really do agree on. And with Trump out of the way, the vindictiveness of a president going after Republicans who don't do exactly what he says gets taken away. There's going to be, I promise you, between 4 and 8 Republican senators are going to be willing to move on things where there's bipartisan consensus.
I don't want to do anything to influence her. I want her to get approved, and then I want her to go by the law, and I know she's going to make a great decision for our country.
But you running as a pro-life Republican, most pro-life Republicans would like to see Roe v. Wade overturned and abortion banned.
Many of them would.
What do you
Perhaps
think?
most of them would. I am telling you, I don't want to do anything to influence anything right now. I don't want to go out tomorrow and say, oh, he's trying to give her a signal, because I didn't speak to her about it. I've done the right thing in so doing. How she's going to rule, you're going to find out perhaps, or you might not find out. I mean, it may never get there. It may never get there. We'll see what happens.
All right, we have another question. This is Cindy Velez. She is undecided. She says she's leaning to Biden, and she did vote for Clinton in 2016. She's registered as a Democrat. Hi, Cindy. What's your question?
Good evening, Savannah. Good evening, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
As the mother of a young male of color, I have reason to respect authority, not only because it's the right thing to do, but also out of fear that he may face profiling or be considered a criminal. As an educator, I've also had similar conversations with my high school students. Mr. President, what will you and your administration do to better prepare our law enforcement officers to work in collaboration with the communities that they serve, and also to protect the lives of innocent Black and Latinos from police brutality and injustice?
Right. I fully understand the question, and I saw everything that you saw over the summer, and it was a terrible thing to watch. We were very strongly, we have a senator named Tim Scott from South Carolina. He came up with a bill that should have been approved. It was great. It was a bill that was strong in terms of law enforcement and strong in terms of enforcing the proper thing and doing the proper thing by law enforcement. And the Democrats just wouldn't go for it. They wouldn't go for it at all. And I don't know why, because it was a really great bill. But I do have to say this. And some people don't like it when I say it, but a lot of people agree. I have done more for the African American community than any president, with the exception of Abraham Lincoln. Criminal justice reform, prison reform, historically Black colleges and universities. I got them funded. They were on a year-to-year basis. They could have been put out of business. As soon as our country had a little bad year, they would have said, I'm sorry, we're not going to fund you. I got them 10-year funding and financing, and more than they even asked for. I became very friendly with a lot of the heads. But we've done more, and of course, opportunity zones. But criminal justice reform, everybody said it could not be done. President Obama and Biden never even tried to do it. They never even tried. But I say that, and I say it often, I'll say it loud, and I'm very proud of it. And I have a great relationship because of what I've done with the African American community. I'm very proud of it.
Let's go to our next question. We have Paulette Dale.
Good evening, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
I have to say, you have a great smile.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, he does. You're so handsome when you smile. Okay. As the daughter of immigrants to the United States who fled Eastern Europe due to religious persecution,
right.
The United States immigration policies are very personal for me.
Right.
Surveys show that most Americans and the majority of Republicans support the Dreamers program. So my question for you, Mr. President, is if you are elected to a second term, do you expect to pursue your previous efforts to cut the DACA program?
Yeah.
Why or why not?
And the DACA is somewhat different than Dreamers. You understand that, and you understand it better than anybody probably in this room. Where do you come from, by the way, originally? Where?
My grandparents were from Russia and Poland.
That's very good. Okay. So we are going to take care of DACA. We're going to take care of Dreamer. It's working right now. We're negotiating different aspects of immigration and immigration law. We've built now over 400 miles of border wall, southern border. Mexico's working very closely with us. We have the strongest border we've ever had. We want people to
go by.
very hard on the DACA program, and you will be, I think, very happy over the course of the next year.
Thank you.
Because I feel the same way as you do about it.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, in point of fact, the DACA program, there are, under your administration, no new applicants are allowed. And in fact, the DACA recipients now have to renew every year as opposed to every 2 years. So in fact, the DACA program has been curtailed by your administration.
Well, what happened is because of the pandemic, much changed on the immigration front. Mexico is heavily infected, as you know, and we've made it very, very difficult to come in because of the pandemic and other reasons, and crime. But we have a very strong border right now, and we have to keep it that way. But we want people to come into our country, but they have to come in through a merit system, and they have to come in legally. And people are very, very happy with it. You haven't heard any complaints about that. But what happened is because of the pandemic, we have to be extra cautious.
You have been promising this immigration bill since, well, at least July, when you told my colleague on Telemundo it was coming, but nothing's come yet.
It's very happy. The fact is, we got rid of catch and release, which is a disaster. You know, you catch somebody, they could be a murderer, they could be a rapist, and we're supposed to release them into our country. These are the laws that I inherited. We ended that program. Now, I think you're going to see something very, very good. The whole immigration, if you look at what's going on, people used to pour into our country, and especially during the pandemic. I think even you, Savannah, will be very impressed.
Sir, we have about 30 seconds left. I think about people sitting out there tonight. There are some who love you. Some of them are sitting right around here, and some who will never vote for you. But there are people in the middle. There are people who aren't sure.
That's right.
There are people who want to know why they should give you a second chance and how you might improve in a second term. 30 seconds, what would you say to them?
Because I've done a great job. We have the strongest economy in the world. We closed it up. We are coming around the corner. The vaccines are coming out soon, and our economy is strong. We are at a level with jobs like we've never been before. We've rebuilt our military. We've rebuilt our borders. We had no borders. We had no nothing. We've rebuilt so much. We've given you the greatest tax cut in the history of our country, greatest regulation cut, equally as important, and we created new levels of jobs that nobody thought was possible.
It can be the Wild West out here.
Leave it there. I got a wrap from the control room. Mr. President, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to the voters' questions. That concludes our town hall. We do want to thank the President again, as well as our audience in hot Miami and all of you watching at home. And a reminder, Donald Trump and Joe Biden are scheduled to meet in person a week from tonight in Nashville, a second and final presidential debate moderated by our own Kristen Welker. Have a good evening, and thanks for being with us.
Say hello to back-to-back.
We're going to look at the environment right now. We're going to get a question from Michelle Elisen from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a businesswoman, a social worker. You're a Republican who's voted for Democrats, but you're not sure what you're going to do this time around. Correct?
Correct. Greetings, former Vice President Biden.
Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Stiles. In a 2012 report of the University of Pittsburgh's Institute of Politics, fracking was discussed and its possible implications for the waterways from the Commonwealth to the Gulf. Fracking has made the population sick and killed wildlife in southwest Pennsylvania. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and small business development centers have already begun to transition people away from fossil fuels. What industries that are not harmful to human health and the environment are you planning for southwest Pennsylvania and the nation?
Well, first of all, I make it clear I do not propose banning fracking. I think you have to make sure that fracking is in fact not emitting methane or polluting the well or dealing with what can be small earthquakes and how they're drilling. So it has to be managed very, very well, number one. Number two, what we have to do is the future rests in renewable energy. The single fastest growing energy source in the world right now, because I'm going to say something that's going to sound self-serving, but I manage the Recovery Act, and I was able to invest billions of dollars into bringing down the cost per BTU of wind and solar. So now it's cheaper than coal, it's cheaper than oil right now. And it has great, great promise. And it's also the fastest growing employer in the energy industry. And so there are a number of things that I would do immediately. Number one, there are well over 100,000 wells that are left uncapped in the region. We could hire 128,000 of these people who are working in the industry to cap these wells and get a good salary doing it now, number one. Number two, we should be moving toward finding the new technologies that are going to be able to deal with carbon capture. So ultimately, as a transition, we moved to a net zero emission of carbon, that we're still going to be able to use, if we find the right technology, some gas to be able to, if we can carbon capture. And I think we're going to be able to move in a direction where by the year 2035, we'll be able to have net zero emissions of carbon from the creation of energy creation. That so we can move it by dealing with those. And every time we talk about global warming or the environment, the president thinks it's a joke, and I think it's jobs. Because what we're going to have happen is, you'll be able to see now, as I started to say before, I as president are going to invest that $600 billion we spend in government contracts only on those things that in fact also are not only made in America, but building an infrastructure that's clean and new. And what we have to do is focus on the transmission of energy across the country from areas relating to solar and wind. The reason is that that has not been mastered yet. I met a lot of people in Silicon Valley. The battery technology is increasing significantly, so you're going to be able to have, for example, solar on your home and a battery beside this by this, as I'm showing you here, in your basement. So when the sun doesn't shine for 5 days, you still have enough energy. So we're making significant progress. The other thing we're going to do is provide an awful lot of work. It's estimated to put close to 1 million people to work by weatherizing 4 million buildings and 2 million homes, because we'll save tons and tons of energy, or billions of barrels of energy over time, and at the same time provide significant employment and good union wages, prevailing wages.
Let me stick on fracking for a second. You said you don't want to ban fracking. As you know, it's an important issue here in Pennsylvania. Not everyone buys your denial. A member of the Boilermakers Local 154, Sean Stephanie, was quoted in the New York Times today saying, "You can't have it both ways." It says you can't meet your goal to end fossil fuels without ending fracking. What do you say to people like Sean who doubt your denial because they think you want to keep that promise?
I'm telling the Boilermakers overwhelmingly endorse me, okay? So the Boilermakers unions endorsed me because I sat down with them in great detail with their leadership exactly what I would do, number one. Number two, what I would do is I would stop giving tax breaks and subsidizing oil. We don't need to subsidize oil any longer, number one. We should stop that and save billions of dollars over time. What I would also do with regard to, the difference between me and the new Green Deal, they say automatically by 2030, we're going to be carbon free. Not possible.
So are you for it or against it? You say you're not for it, but in your website it says you call it a crucial framework.
My deal is a crucial framework, but not the new Green Deal. The new Green Deal calls for elimination of all non-renewable energy by 2030. You can't get there. You're going to need to be able to transition, George, to be able to transition to get to the place where we invest in new technologies that allow us to do things that get us to a place where we get to net zero emission, including in agriculture. I've laid out a detailed plan. We should be taking the plan where we allow significant more land to be put in conservation, plant deep-rooted plants which absorb carbon from the air, and in fact pay farmers to do it. All the horse manure and cow manure, and they can take out the methane and use it as fertilizer and make a lot of money doing it. For example, right now down in people, when I say that, they wonder what I'm talking about. The biggest carbon sink in the world is the Amazon. More carbon absorbed from the air, diminishing global warming, in the Amazon than all the carbon emitted on a yearly basis from the United States of America, from all vehicles and all means. So we have to use our imaginations. We have to move in the direction as well, providing for electric vehicles. Electric vehicles will save billions of gallons of oil, create estimated, not me, Wall Street, 1 million automobile jobs. But we're lagging, we're not investing. We're not doing any of the research.
Got to take another quick break. We'll be right back.
Which one you want me to talk about? Proud Boys? I don't really know him. David Duke. David Duke, who? I don't know him. I don't know the guy. You know, I don't know where you grew up, but that was a very common device in Queens, where we grew up, you know? Where were you the other night? Were you with Lewis when Lewis? I don't know Lewis. I don't know. You know, it's like I heard that on the street corner like 100 times when somebody was riding someone else's bicycle. He has to know who QAnon is. So what did that situation speak to you? Why would he feign ignorance of an obvious?
And Chris, I think that might be the headline of the night. I mean, obviously the president knows what QAnon is. There are QAnon supporters who go to his rallies all the time. I go to his rallies and we see the QAnon supporters who are there. They put out those catchphrases to one another as they're walking into these rally venues and so on. And so when Savannah Guthrie tried to press the president on QAnon and would he disavow it, she gave him multiple opportunities. He had chance after chance after chance to do it, to denounce QAnon, and he simply did not do it, and here's how that played out.
Let me ask you about QAnon. It is this theory that Democrats are a satanic pedophile ring and that you are the savior of that. Now, can you just once and for all state that that is completely not true and that disavow QAnon in its entirety?
I know nothing about QAnon.
I just told you.
I know very little. You told me, but what you tell me doesn't necessarily make it fact. I hate to say that. I know nothing about it. I do know they are very much against pedophilia. They fight it very hard, but I know nothing about it.
They believe it is a satanic cult run by the deep state.
Let me just tell you, what I do hear about it is they are very strongly against pedophilia, and I agree with that. I mean, I do agree with that, and I agree with it.
But there's not a satanic pedophile cult being run by.
I know nothing
you don't know
about
that? Okay.
No, I don't know
you
that.
Just this
neither
week.
do you know that.
Okay.
So the president says he doesn't know anything about QAnon, and then he says, well, he thinks it's about pedophilia. It can't be both of those things, Chris. And finally, you were talking about this retweet that he put out there earlier over the last 24 hours, lending credence to this crazy conspiracy theory that Osama bin Laden is still alive. When you're president of the United States, you simply don't do that. You don't retweet crazy conspiracy theory tweets. And so it's sort of, I think that encapsulated the night for me, Chris, because it felt like tonight was 1 hour of 4 years of the Trump presidency, lies, conspiracies, and nonsense.
Expected way more from the oldest bachelorette.
Sick.
The Bachelorette. New.
Special legal protections not afforded to traditional media outlets once they editorialize or once they decide to edit and decide what the content is going to be or what their approval is based on political opinion.
She, of course, has been very clear about that. The CDC has been very clear about that, including since the president started mischaracterizing this study. The CDC tweeting out yesterday, quote, the interpretation that more mask wearers are getting infected compared to non-mask wearers is incorrect. It's just wildly irresponsible for the president to be telling that lie and telling it twice tonight on this town hall. He did it at his rally, so we knew it was coming, but he did it twice tonight. It is not true that 85% of people who wear masks get COVID. That is absolutely bunk. And coming from the president, it's potentially deadly bunk.
I choose my sanity over the conspiracies that pretend that people who are in power who don't necessarily like the president are part of pedophilia rings. I mean, and it goes on and on and on from there. So, yes, he knows. Yes, he is familiar with it. Yes, he retweets QAnon-related conspiracy ideas. And the fact that Savannah wouldn't let it go, you know what? Good for her, because he rarely gets, as you mentioned earlier, tough questions other than, he doesn't really do interviews other than what you called state TV.
Yeah, and look, again, we've been in this situation, both of us, many times. You know, you want to move on, you want to spread the ball, you want to get into people. You can't do it with Trump because you will wind up allowing him to end on a deception.
Michelle's worried about money. Ben.
Vice President. Good to be back home. I'm from Pennsylvania.
Yes, I know. Scranton, right?
Yep.
So, peace is breaking out all over the world. Our troops are coming home. Serbia is talking to Kosovo. And the Arabs and Israelis are talking peace, which I believe is a modern-day miracle, what's going on. Does President Trump's foreign policy deserve some credit?
a little, but not a whole lot. We find ourselves in a position where we're more isolated in the world than we've ever been. Our allies are our goal alone, America first has made America alone. You have Iran closer to having enough nuclear material to build a bomb. North Korea has more bombs and missiles available to it. We find ourselves where our NATO allies are publicly saying they can't count on us. We're in a situation as well where in the Far East we find ourselves in the Western Pacific where we're isolated as well. You have Japan and South Korea at odds with one another. China is making moves. So I would say we find ourselves less secure than we've been. I do compliment the president on the deal with Israel recently, but if you take a look, we're not very well trusted around the world. When 17 major nations of the world were asked who they trust more, who's a better leader, and the president came in behind both the international survey, both behind Putin as well as Xi. And look what Putin's doing. You have Americans, bounties on American military's heads in Afghanistan. They have more people there now, by the way, than when we left in Afghanistan. And we find ourselves in a situation where he spoke to Putin 6 times, hadn't said a word to him. And NATO is on the risk of beginning to crack because they doubt our concern, whether we're there. You see what's happening in everything from Belarus to Poland to Hungary, and the rise of totalitarian regimes in the world, and as well as this president embraces all the thugs in the world. I mean, he's best friends with the leader of North Korea, sending love letters. He doesn't take on Putin in any way, and he's learned the art of the steal from the art of the deal by Xi in China. So I would respectfully suggest, no, there is no plan, no coherent plan for foreign policy. We've always ruled, we've been most effective as a world.
Existing conditions. This is something, again, that Savannah Guthrie did call him on directly. The president, his administration right now has a case before the Supreme Court in which they are asking the Supreme Court to strike down the rule under Obamacare that requires insurance companies to give you coverage even if you've got pre-existing conditions. That's a fact. The president is lying about it, saying he's protecting people with pre-existing conditions. There is no replacement Republican health care plan that would supplant the pre-existing conditions protections under Obamacare with some other thing. There is no other Trump administration health care plan, despite the
example, some was supplied by a Ukrainian oligarch. In another case, a Russian oligarch, former, First Lady of Moscow. In another case, to buy a new car with a Kazakh oligarch, as well as connected members of China's Communist Party. They even got to go on a $100,000 family spending spree. You have Chinese nationals, Russian nationals, Kazakh nationals, Ukrainian nationals. Why would all of these uber-wealthy, well-connected foreign nationals be given zero experience, Hunter, billions of dollars? Don't forget, $1.5 billion deal with the Bank of China with no experience. GMA, Hunter said, well,
lives and rights of LGBTQ people are protected under U.S. law.
Well, flat out just change the law. Eliminate those executive orders, number one. You may recall, I'm the guy who said, I was raised by a man who, I remember I was being dropped off. My dad was a high school educated, well-read man who was a really decent guy, and I was being dropped off to get an application in the center of our city, Wilmington, Delaware, the corporate capital of the world at the time. And these 2 men, I'm getting out to get an application to be a lifeguard in the African-American community because there was a big swimming pool complex. And these 2 men, well-dressed, leaned up and hugged one another and kissed one another. I'm getting out of the car at the light, and I turned to my dad. My dad looked at me and said, Joey, it's simple. They love each other. The idea that an 8-year-old child or a 10-year-old child decides, I decided I want to be transgender. That's what I think I'd like to be. It may make my life a lot easier. There should be zero discrimination. And what's happening is too many transgender women of color are being murdered They're being murdered. I mean, I think it's up to now 17. Don't hold me to that number, but it's higher now.
Yeah.
And just this year. And so I promise you, there is no reason to suggest that there should be any right denied your daughter or daughters, whichever, one or two, one, your daughter, that your other daughter has a right to be and do. None. Zero. And by the way, my son Bo passed away, was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware. He was the guy who got the first transgender law passed in the state of Delaware, and because of a young man who became a woman who worked for him in the Attorney General's office.
We've got one more segment coming up. Thank you.
And I'm proud of that.
I was just... presidential debate has now been that he's continuing to only speak to his base. Now, I know obviously with him not denouncing QAnon, it's hard to make an argument otherwise, but he didn't answer the question about whether he wants to overturn Roe v. Wade. I mean, that for a Donald Trump looking only at his base should have been a slam dunk. But this is a Donald Trump looking at a chasm between himself and Joe Biden with female voters right now, as people are voting. And the fact that he didn't want to go there is very telling about where he sees things, not just with the people who have already voted, but the internal polling that he's seeing.
To Dana's point, he also said tonight several times, we should be on the same side, especially around health care. That's new talk for him. And he still bashed Pelosi in the deal making. By the way, we're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about what Biden was saying. I think not getting a deal for Democrats right now, even a partial one, is something we got to talk about. What Michael brought up about what Biden should be answering for, we also have to talk about, especially about court packing. I don't know why people are saying that that's a distraction. It's a distraction because they won't answer it. But to Dana's point, he said we should be on the same side. He wouldn't answer about Roe v. Wade, and he said, I promise we'll always protect their pre-existing conditions, even though they're in court right now trying to end the pre-existing conditions. But good point, Dana, as always. Let's take a quick break. Let's come back and talk Biden. Michael, I'll start with you. Sanjay, I'll get you in there in terms of points of contrast on COVID, because both guys really quiet on better plans for the next 6 months. And we got to talk about that. Next.
With this seal, this restaurant is committing to hire.
He's accountable. They are going to continue to do this. If we don't stop them now, if Republicans don't stand up and do something about this, these companies are going to run this country. That's their desire. These woke capitalists, they want to run America. Big government, big tech. They want to run America. We've got to stop them. We've got to do something right now.
All right, Senator, thank you. We got a lot of ground to cover tonight. Apparently, Joe Biden open to packing the United States Supreme Court. We have all the details. And coming up, Hollywood liberals, members of the mob and the media, have an absolute meltdown over NBC actually doing a town hall with President Trump, even though it's abusively biased. We got the tape, and C-SPAN suspending Steve Scully indefinitely after it was revealed that he lied about being hacked on Twitter. The great one, Mark Levin, weighs in on that and more. The fascinating thing, what about the Commission on Presidential Debates that said that they are so fair? No, they're not. We'll explain straight ahead.
I am truly humbled by the prospect of serving on the Supreme Court.
Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
I would assume this role to serve you. Judges are not policymakers, and they must be resolute in setting aside any policy views they might hold. And if the Senate does me the honor of confirming me, I pledge to discharge the responsibilities of this job to the very best of my ability.
Sebastian Gorka again for 100% drop.
Read. So much on the line. It demands the most straightforward, news-making, real answers. The most informed voices from all sides. The countdown is on to the vote. What will our future look like? ABC's This Week with George. It all plays out right here every Sunday.
The most consequential week yet of this hyper-political year.
Right as you get closer to casting your vote every Sunday on ABC.
What Amazon could possibly have planned for Sioux Falls at 10.
The Vice President and the People, a special edition of 2020. Here again, George Stephanopoulos.
And welcome back to our town hall with former Vice President Joe Biden. The next question comes from Keenan Wilson, Narberth, Pennsylvania, Democrat.
Good evening. You say that you committed to entering this race after the events of Charlottesville in 2017. I assume that that feeling that prompted you to run will not go away once the results are determined. So, hypothetically, if you lose, how will you use your platform to urge President Donald Trump and those rallying behind him towards the ideals of a more perfect union?
Well, to be very honest with you, I think that's very hard. He is not, things have not lent themselves to him learning from what's happened, what's gone before. And instead of being chastened by being one of the few presidents, the only president to be impeached and then have a member of his own party vote to expel him, it emboldened him. So, but what I will do, hopefully I'll go back to being a professor at the University of Pennsylvania and making the case that I've been made and at the Biden Institute at the University of Delaware, focusing on the same issues relating to what constitutes decency and honor in this country. It's the thing that got me involved in public life to begin with. As a kid, I moved from Scranton, where there were no African Americans, and moved down to Claremont, Delaware, and in Delaware we have the 8th largest black population as a percent of population. It was an epiphany for me, seeing what was going on, and I got deeply involved. I'm no great shakes. I don't mean I wasn't John Lewis. I don't mean to imply that, but it's the thing that's motivated. My dad used to have an expression, for real. He said, everyone's entitled to be treated with dignity. Everybody. And it was real. Everybody is. And so whether I'm a defeated candidate for president back teaching or I'm elected president, it is a major element of everything that I'm about because it reflects who we are as a nation. And it's what makes us, this is every single solitary generation. The dial has moved closer and closer and more to inclusion. And we are a country that is a country of slaves who came here 400 years ago, indigenous people, and everyone else is an immigrant. And we're a diverse country. And unless we are able to treat people equally, we're just never going to meet our potential. But I think the American people want to see that happen. I think they're ready to see it happen. And I tell you one thing, if I'm elected president, you will not hear me race baiting, you'll not hear me dividing, you'll hear me trying to unify. And unify with, bring people together. When I said I was running because I wanted to unify the country, people said, well, they were the old days. We better be able to do it again. Great. We better be able to do it again.
Mr. Vice President, if you lose, what will that say to you about where America is today?
Well, it could say that I'm a lousy candidate and I didn't do a good job. But I think, I hope that it doesn't say that we are as racially, ethnically, and religiously at odds with one another as it appears the president wants us to be.
Jailed for minor drug offenses. Biden was asked if that was a mistake. He said yes. His campaign is saying that he was referring to the 1986 crime bill, not the 1994 crime bill. So that's something that will need to be sorted out. But this is a very heavily policy-focused town hall. You know, Biden didn't really spend that much time going after President Trump directly. Instead, he is laying out what his agenda is, really offering this contrast without the president even being on that stage. Chris?
Arlette, thank you very much. No question. Joe Biden says things where he makes mistakes at a minimum. Good news for him is they're getting called out by a complete gaffe machine in our current president, President Trump. Let's bring back the panel here. Now, Michael, we have unfinished business. And
at Billion Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram or Billion
is committing to higher levels of cleanliness.
So what's going on?
I'm a talking dog.
I should never own a...
I don't get the criticism that I am asking a distraction question when I push the Democrats on court packing. Their whole pitch is that they will be more straight than Trump is. That answer that he just gave, I don't even understand. I don't know. I'm not in favor of it. I got to see what happens here. The people deserve to know my position, and I'll let them know before the election. Why not just say yes or no?
It's not a distraction question. It's a real question based on a real movement inside the Democratic Party to change the number of seats, to expand the number of seats on the Supreme Court in order to get more democratically like-minded judges, if you will, or a Democratic president to appoint more judges. I mean, that is a fact. That is out there. The former vice president knows that. He's trying to avoid answering that because if he says, yes, I'm for it, it will really make people who are, you know, kind of inclined to traditionally vote for Republicans but don't like Donald Trump maybe think twice about Biden. If he says, or if he says no, that he's going to piss off the progressives and the opposite of what I just said about independents. But the thing is that when he says, I'm going to wait until before Election Day, as David Chalian reminds us every day, Election Day is right now in many states. Millions of people have voted, so that's not going to cut it with them.
That answer is Trumpery by definition. That has nothing to do with Trump's name. Look it up. It's a real word. Michael, but isn't this an example of why Trump screwed up and should have been on the stage with Biden? Because imagine how you expose that kind of answer.
No doubt, it would have been in the president's best interest and the country's best interest to see them together. The idea that America is clicking back and forth tonight, I think, is sad. Look, that answer from the vice president is illogical because it could apply, that standard could apply to any hot button issue.
Yes.
Oh, if I answer you, that's going to become the issue. Well, that's the nature of public service. But the bigger point is this. It's all in keeping with the Hippocratic oath nature of the vice president's campaign. They're comfortably ahead, and all they want to do is no harm from now until the election. I knew the minute that Trump turned down the virtual debate opportunity that the vice president would fill his dance card and not be on the same stage with him because they want to limit any exposure they have and just ride this out.
How big a deal, David, is the hamina on court packing headline for headline versus, yeah, I want you guys to decide, the president says, whether or not we killed Obama, whether or not the SEAL team guys are heroes or shills.
Right, as you said, it's not sort of an equal weight kind of a thing here, but it is befuddling to me how much time Joe Biden has spent on saying he doesn't want to talk about court packing. It's just an inordinate amount of time.
Name on the ballot, she can go out there like the rest of us have done, find out how unpleasant an experience that can be, and let her debate Donald Trump. But that's what I'm so sick of. These debates are a joke. They're a TV show. They're designed to pick a winner. The winner has already been picked before it starts, and no less than Bob Dole, who is one of the great statesmen of our time. I love Senator Dole, and he's such a true American hero and statesman. And he said that he knows all the Republicans on this debate commission, and not one of them would vote for Trump. So they've been outed. It's just shameful. One final thing I want to mention is that the little gentleman over at CNN that you mentioned, he said this is terrible, Steve Scully being outed for lying, because it means that the media reputation will be lower. And I tweeted out this afternoon, it can't get any lower.
It can't.
It's as low as it can get.
It's about as low as it can be, which is a really good point. Judge, I see you laughing.
Well, it's true. I mean, they lie to us all the time, and I'm just tired of their lying. You know, think about it, Sean. The fact that you've got the people on television and the Hollywood types who are saying, you know, by allowing the President of the United States to actually have a forum to talk to the American people is dividing the country. It's making people choose. This is a horrible thing to do. They want to decide what we should hear, if we should hear it, and when we should hear it.
You have to maximize every moment, every interview. Today was a big, perch for him, and I think he probably drove voters away to the extent there are any still open to him. It was a disaster. And by the way, I thought he seemed small. I thought he seemed a little bit low energy, to use a term he likes to use, almost defeated in a way.
They're watching tonight, their main concern in their life.
The rules they set, and I'm confident that the Cleveland Clinic is the one overseeing it. I think they're going to not let happen what happened last time. They're going to demand that it's safe.
But you expect to be there?
Oh, I expect to be there.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for your time tonight. Thank all the questioners here. It was really terrific questions. I think you did a service to our democracy tonight. Thank you very much. I want to go back to my colleague David Muir in New York.
All right, George, thank you. So there you have it, the ABC News Town Hall with former Vice President Joe Biden. Just 19 days until the election in this country. Of course, voting already underway. More than 18 million Americans have voted. Tonight, as you heard from the Vice President there was supposed to be a presidential debate. President Trump pulled out of that debate when the commission wanted a virtual debate after the COVID outbreak at the White House. Joe Biden had agreed to do that instead, then doing the town hall here with ABC. And the president, in a late move this week, agreeing to the town hall and another network, sort of split screen in America tonight. We did hear the president and the Vice President get pressed on several topics tonight. The Vice President in Philadelphia now talking to those voters, socially distanced in the audience, Republicans, Democrats, and some undecideds. They asked him about the pandemic, whether he'd take a vaccine if ready before year's end. He said yes if the scientists are behind it. He was asked if he would raise taxes on the wealthy and on corporate America, even in a recovery. He said yes. There was a deeply personal exchange. A young voter asking Biden why young black Americans should vote for him. He made his case. He was asked about packing the Supreme Court, and I want to bring in Mary Bruce, who is outside the Constitution Center there in Philadelphia tonight, because Mary, you and I have been watching all week the confirmation hearing of Judge Amy Coney Barrett, President Trump's pick to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Biden said tonight that it depends on how this is handled, saying Americans are already voting. He was pressed on what that meant, how this was handled. He was pressed, will he have a position on packing the court before Election Day?
David, Joe Biden tonight notably went further on this issue than he has before. He has been pressed on this repeatedly, and while he still isn't giving a clear answer on whether he would expand the court, saying he's, quote, not a fan of court packing, tonight he notably didn't rule it out, saying that he will have a clear answer on this by Election Day after the confirmation hearings for Amy Coney Barrett, saying that Americans have and voters have a right to know. But David, of course, voting is already well underway. 19 days to go. Nearly 18 million Americans have cast their ballot. So the question tonight is, what is Joe Biden waiting for on this?
And Mary, stick with us on this. He did say he'd have a position before Election Day, and we're looking at live pictures right now, interacting with voters in that debate hall. He was the one who first agreed to doing a town hall after the debate was canceled. This campaign certainly knows that they think these are good opportunities for the Vice President to make his case by interacting with American voters.
David, here tonight we saw something that we really haven't seen very often in this campaign that has been upended by the pandemic. Joe Biden having an opportunity to interact directly with voters, answering their questions about what matters most to them as they make this choice. His campaign feels that he shines in these moments, that he does best when he is able to speak directly with voters. I know that Joe Biden misses having more of these opportunities. And I was struck tonight, when you take a step back, how much Joe Biden tonight really talked about his plans. There was a lot of deep diving that he was doing into his policy proposals going forward. This was a night largely about Joe Biden and actually surprisingly not a lot about his opponent. He didn't really speak that much about Donald Trump. This was a night for him, Joe Biden, to connect with voters and talk about how he would be changing their futures.
Yeah, as you rightly point out, Mary, a lot more about policy and plans moving forward than we heard from really either candidate in that first debate after the shouting match sort of erupted and really never ended as that debate played out in front of America. As the Vice President continues to talk with voters there, we also know President Trump in Florida tonight pressed in his own town hall on whether he was tested for COVID the day of that first presidential debate. He's pressed a number of times on this. If he took a test on the day of that debate, he said, I probably did, but said he doesn't take a test every day. He was also asked if he was ever warned that this would be the greatest national security threat of his administration, coronavirus, which has been reported that he was warned. He said he wasn't warned, but that he knew it was a big threat. At the same time, the president said, I didn't want to panic this country. I didn't want to go out there and say everyone's going to die. Pressed on whether or not there's a middle ground, whether or not he could have leveled with the American people, he said no, there's no middle ground. I want to bring in Rachel Scott. She's live with us from Florida tonight where that town hall is playing out, because as we're looking at pictures from Philadelphia, we know the president tonight was pressed on that New York Times reporting on his taxes. Rachel, he was asked if he ever really did pay just $750 in federal income taxes. He was also asked about that reported debt of about $400 million, asked who does he owe that money to?
David, he was asked whether or not he owes that money to foreign entities, and he said, quote, not that I know of. The president downplayed the amount of debt that he is in. He seemingly said that it's just a tiny fraction of what he is worth. David, I was struck tonight about how much the president was on defense. The president walked into tonight's town hall, behind double digits in the polls at a time when he is under fire for his handling of the pandemic. And the president tonight spent much of his time on defense, defending his handling of not only the pandemic, issues like healthcare, as well as the economy. What we did not hear a lot of tonight, just 19 days out from Election Day, was the president talking about his rival, Joe Biden. And the president tonight was forced to confront key questions about his health. Whether or not he tested negative on that debate day is a lingering question. One, the president even said tonight that he could not even remember, could not even recall whether or not he was tested for coronavirus on the day of the debate. The president also tonight, David, downplaying the coronavirus, insisting that we are rounding the corner at a time when the CDC predicts that we may record 240,000 deaths just 1 week after Election Day. David?
Rachel Scott.
Blast, now you're on blast. It's a circle. Has been waiting for, only from Verizon.
The foggiest idea, repeatedly, what his son was doing with Ukraine or Burisma. Yeah, he's busy. He's vice president, busy screwing up the swine flu and screwing up the economy. He doesn't have time for his son. He doesn't ask his son, where'd you get all this money? What'd you do today? How's your career? Not a word, apparently. Very strange group. Okay, Joe Biden has said he didn't know anything. But then a few months later, he makes a call to the prosecutor in the Ukraine and basically says, hey, lay off. Basically says, you are to quit or you're to be fired. Otherwise, we're going to withhold $1 billion from you. And he says, one has nothing to do with the other. The media jump in and they say, well, the European Union didn't want him anyway, the prosecutor. You know, there can be two truths at the same time. Maybe the European Union didn't want the prosecutor, but clearly the Biden family didn't want the prosecutor either. And so here's the problem. Joe Biden is a liar. Joe Biden did know. He knew. He met with the guy. And let me
Supreme Court, and George really pushed him on this, and we have what appears to be a commitment that after the Amy Coney Barrett vote, he will tell the American people. He said voters have a right to know where he stands on expanding the court. On the other side, Donald Trump was asked a very simple question by a voter, what is your plan to deal with health care and rising health care costs? And it was abundantly clear that he has absolutely no plan. This is something he has had 4 years, nearly 4 years in office to come up with. He basically said that what he has done is he's done away with the individual mandate with Obamacare, and then talked a little bit more about how Obamacare is not a good thing and we need something better, but absolutely nothing about what he would actually do on health care.
And John, as you've been reporting, he's been saying for a very long time now, I'll have that plan in a couple of weeks, and still no plan.
Still no plan.
John Carl watching both debates. We thank you. We know you were watching the ABC one in front of you while you were trying to watch the one on the other network at the same time, and we're sure to appreciate that. Our analysts are standing by, of course, from both ends of the political spectrum. Our powerhouse political team. Our coverage of the ABC News Town Hall continues right here in a moment.
The ups and downs, everything. They'd fight like hell on the floor, and then they'd go eat lunch together because they always put their friendship and their country first. Now more than ever, we need a president who will put service before self. A president who will lead with courage and compassion, not ego. A president who will respect the sacrifices made by our service members and their families. A president who will honor our fallen heroes. And a president who will bring out the best in us, not the worst. Joe Biden's dedicated his life to this country and working across the aisle to get things done. Joe will always fight for the American people, just like John did.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
I'm Randy. And I'm Dave. And we're...
The chairman changed that deal. This is a communist Chinese company after we met in Miami to a much more lasting and lucrative agreement to create a holding company, 50% owned by me, 50% owned by him. That would be the communist Chinese. We're talking about 2017 now. Biden's no longer vice president. What do they talk about there? well, Biden's going to get a piece of the action. Which Biden? Joe. They talk about Joe getting a piece of the action. Is that true? I don't know. Will they ask him? Will they ask Joe Biden about it? And what do we get today? We get the typical Washington Post hit piece on who? Rudy Giuliani. You see, the issue isn't Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and all the corruption and the millions of dollars. The issue's none of that. No, the issue's now Rudy Giuliani. It's like the Russia hoax. It's like all that stuff. 4 former officials familiar with the matter say that the Russians were trying to get their claws into Rudy. No names, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive information and conversation. The warnings to the White House. So it's Rudy Giuliani that we have to watch out for.
Distraction question. I'm doing the work for the GOP for them only in this bizarro world. Is that a kind of accusation that lands these days? But I don't get the reasoning behind not answering the question. All he has to say is no. Or, you know what? I'm going to hold it over Mitch McConnell's head. Because if I win, I need to get some judges passed, and he's going to try to do to me what he did to Obama, and I'm going to hold this over his head. Let's see how he behaves. Because this time, he's going to pay if he plays dirty. Either answer works, but this answer, no good.
Yeah, D- on that answer. There's just no way around it. And now he's put himself in this opposition where he says he's going to wait until some other date. I guess what he's saying is that he's holding out some hope that they won't nominate this new justice if he continues to play this game. It doesn't make any sense. None of it makes any sense. And so I think the reality is the Democrats are very angry and upset because at every level of the government right now, it feels like the deck is kind of stacked against us. We got 2 Supreme Court justice seats that we don't feel were given to Republicans fairly. You feel like the Electoral College stacks the deck against Democrats. You feel like the Senate's got the filibuster, all these different things, the gerrymandering. There's so much pent-up frustration that Democrats are feeling that this issue of being able to pack the court has become a teddy bear for a lot of Democrats to hug onto at night, and he doesn't want to take the teddy bear away. But I think he's hurting his own brand by not doing it. I think it's better for him just to come forward and say, that's not my brand of politics, I'm not going to do it, or to your point, say he's going to use it as a bargaining chip. But right now, I think he's hurting his brand.
I want to paraphrase. Control room, do we have the Roe v. Wade? Hold on, Rick, just let me see if I have the sound, and then I want to hear what you're going to say. Do we have the Roe v. Wade sound yet, or no? All right, we're waiting on it. Great. Rick, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I just think, the idea that Democrats are frustrated because of a filibuster rule that's been in place for 120 years, or the Electoral College has been in place since the founding of the country. I mean, those are hard things to be upset about. I understand you may want to change them.
Go ahead, man.
I understand you may want to change them, but the reality is those things have been around for a long, long time.
Yeah, so let's discuss. Go ahead.
Yeah, they have been around for a while. The problem that we're having now is, and I think it's dangerous for the country, is you're starting some of these protections that were put in the Constitution to make sure that small states weren't run over by the big states, trying to protect, frankly, big states, little states from big states. The problem is you now have a demographic problem where the big states also have a whole bunch of people of color. They're big blue states on the coast, and you got a different politics there. And now it's starting to feel, this is not by design, but sometimes you draw the cards a certain way. All these little red states, when you got Wyoming with 500,000 people, has 2 senators, and they can filibuster, and California's got 30 million people and only has 2, it starts to feel like a rub. And so all I'm saying is, if you want to look at what's going on, I'm not saying, what I'm saying is, let's look at what's rubbing different people different ways. It's starting to feel like the House is gerrymandered, the Senate is unfair, plus it's been a filibuster, the presidency, you've got the Electoral College, the Supreme Court, you've got 2 stolen seats. You're starting to have a big problem for Democrats saying, how come every time the unfairness seems to run against us? And that's what Joe Biden's trying to manage.
Well, that's because it's not true. First off, it's not true. Number one, gerrymandering happens. Look at California. You want to see gerrymandering? How about the state of California? Let's just be honest. Gerrymandering goes on with both
people can hear you both. Give each other a chance, but get the points in.
Yeah, so the idea that this is a partisan thing, gerrymandering goes on in both ways. And look, we got to go back and realize that we are a republic, and we are a group of states, and state sovereignty is important, and protecting the rights of states so that the federal government doesn't overrun states and basically create one big national government.
The former vice president, instead the overall picture of him interacting with voters there. Do you agree?
I think he did help himself tonight, and I agree with Rom. I mean, look, Joe Biden is a very decent person. But what I also saw tonight was the conflict he faces, the balancing act he tries to do every day as the leader of the Democratic Party. We heard it. We heard it. I don't like court packing. I do support fracking. You know, these are contrasts to things that he has on his website, the fracking issue. On the court packing, what I heard is he's probably going to do it because the base of his party is going to push him. You know, this is a tough call for voters, right? Because they like the decency of Joe Biden, but I think they know what he really represents is a much more liberal America.
But Sarah, let me ask you this. In pulling out of that second debate because they wanted it to be virtual, in President Trump's decision not to do it, was that somewhat of a gift to the Biden campaign so that they could have a town hall where they're interacting with voters in such a personal way?
Well, look, these events can be risky for candidates, but I thought Joe Biden handled himself very well. He's very, very good with people. We saw that tonight. And to some degree, the Trump campaign kind of put out early on that, you know, there's a senility, he's old, he stumbles. And we didn't see that tonight. He was pretty composed and articulate.
All right, Sarah Fagan with us tonight as well. Sarah, thank you. I want to get right to Yvette Simpson, also an ABC News contributor, CEO of Democracy for America. Yvette, great to see you as always. What did you make of the Vice President's performance tonight?
Hey, David. It's the best I've seen him. I think he did a great job, not just directly answering questions, talking about specific policies. I think he took that very hard stance of acknowledging that he was wrong about the 1994 crime bill, which I think was a great position for him to take. So I think it was a great night for him. And I do think he's walking a tightrope, I think in part because if you're the leader of a party, you have to take everybody's opinions to bear. We have not seen that with Donald Trump. He's not listening to most Republicans or most people. And I actually do respect Joe Biden for, I think, having a broader perspective, listening to all sides, and actually being willing to adjust his own thinking to the realities of the day.
Yvette, thank you. I want to get into Matt Dowd, ABC News chief political analyst. And Matt, to Sarah's point, on a lot of those issues, Joe Biden trying to walk the line, he's trying to reach out to some of the moderate Republicans they're convinced they can get to come over to their side.
Well, the best presidents and the best candidates have to always walk a line. George W. Bush, who Sarah and I both worked for, had to walk a line between many of his moderate stances and the conservative part of the party. Bill Clinton had to walk a line. The best ones do that. I think the way to judge these things is what is their imperative? What is each candidate's imperative when they approach these things and come in? As we saw 2 weeks ago, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Joe Biden was 7 points ahead 2 weeks ago. He's now 10 points ahead. And so all Joe Biden had to do tonight to win this thing and move forward is make the voters who already are voting for him or already want to vote for him comfortable in that choice. And I think he did that. Donald Trump has a much harder one, which is persuade Biden voters to move to him.
All right. Less than 3 weeks to go, Matt.
More have been hurt since then, including nearly 500 in New York City. But this most recent attack happened in an alley in Seattle this afternoon. An officer responding to a call of a man brandishing a flaming piece of lumber. And when the cop rolled up, the suspect threw the blazing 2x2 into the patrol vehicle, which caught fire with the officer still inside. An eyewitness says that officer then opened fire on the assailant.
The officer is sitting on the passenger side of the vehicle, and he's actually firing shots as the vehicle is rolling, and the cop actually falls to the ground. Luckily, didn't roll over.
The suspect tried to flee, but other police arriving on scene chased him into a nearby parking garage, tased him, and took him into custody. The injured officer was hospitalized with what are described as non-life-threatening burns. His vehicle, as you can see, destroyed. Another example of the random dangers our police face every day and night on the streets of America, with 32 officers fatally shot in the line of duty this year alone, Sean.
All right, Rick. Prayers for the police officers everywhere under assault of an attack around the country. Thank you.
Dizziness or fainting, changes in urine or eyesight, muscle pain.
Fracking went unquestioned yet again. Once again asked if he was never for fracking. Biden can't seem to make up his mind on that issue, but during the primary, he and Kamala Harris wanted to ban fracking. Now he's saying the opposite again. Take a look.
I am not banning fracking, period. But kiddo, I want you to just take a look, okay? You don't have to agree, but I want you to look in my eyes. I guarantee you, we're going to end fossil fuel, and I am not going to cooperate with it, okay? No more, no new fracking.
Would there be any place for fossil fuels, including coal and fracking, in a Biden administration?
No, we would work it out. We would make sure it's eliminated and no more subsidies for either one of those.
Will you commit to implementing a federal ban on fracking your first day in office, adding the United States to the list of countries who have banned this devastating practice?
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yes.
Yeah, they all want to ban fracking. Now we don't want to ban fracking because we want to win Pennsylvania and Ohio. So we'll say whatever we need to say. Although Joe did admit tonight that, well, I don't like the idea of core packing, but I'm open to it. Joining us, author of Follow the Money, Dan Bongino, author of Firebrand, and that would describe him. That's Matt Gaetz, Florida congressman. All right, Joe doesn't have to answer questions about Hunter, business dealings. He flips and flops and flails on fracking, taxes, the Supreme Court, packing the Supreme Court. Matt, your take.
Well, the Joe Biden town hall I saw wasn't very much fun. You know, Biden can't be the commander-in-chief. He can barely be the commander of a sentence. And time and again, I think he was confronted with flip-flops and circumstances that confused his voters. And you compare that to the Trump town hall, the president was not only in command and engaging, he was incredibly charming, whether it was with the mother and daughter where he talked about teaming up to win the daughter's vote, or whether he was responding to frontline healthcare workers or people concerned about the economy. And I think one reason he was so charming is the Trump town hall was packed full of women. I mean, there were more women in the Trump town hall than in a Bill Clinton hot tub. And I think NBC News might have thought that was going to backfire on the president, but in fact it gave him a platform to be able to show, I think, a real charming side of himself.
Of course your book is called Firebrand. Dan Bongino.
Well, listen, we know Biden's a con man, and if these devastating emails are in fact confirmed and authenticated, Sean, Biden really should step out of the race. I mean, oh my gosh, you can't say that. I just did. Because it opens up a ton of questions that would implicate us in national security questions we really don't want to think about, like, what else does China have on Joe Biden? What is, 10 for Hunter and what?
I got a break, but you're 100% right. He's compromised. Straight ahead.
Josh Gad and music from the Foo Fighters. Jimmy Kimmel Live, new tonight on ABC.
As we continue to watch that room in Philadelphia, the vice president taking questions, even after the town hall. Byron Pitts of Nightline, what did you make of tonight?
Hey, one of the telling moments for me was that young black voter who talked about the lack of enthusiasm for Joe Biden to this point. It was an issue that hurt Hillary Clinton when she ran for president, and I believe it'll be an issue for Joe Biden. It's a gap he has to close. It isn't enough for many voters that he's not Donald Trump.
He said, I hope I answered your question to that young voter as well. Martha Raddatz, you and I have done so many debates together, but town halls are so different when you can have more of a conversation with the American voter.
Exactly right, and this is what Joe Biden loves. We'll probably all be in bed before Joe Biden is out of that hall. This was really his moment tonight, but the real test, David, will be next week. He won't get some of those friendly questions from those town hall people. He will have a combative President Trump, and you can guarantee he will be coming straight for him, David.
You've witnessed it before, being the moderator in the room. And Terry Moran, nothing is predictable about 2020, and look what we had tonight, a split screen here in America.
You know, David, Donald Trump will probably measure victory by ratings. The Trump show has been the Trump presidency, but the voters may look at it differently. It is essentially an opportunity for them to re-up the Trump show or to go with what the Biden presidency might be, and I think Joe Biden did make a case it would be a return to normalcy.
Terry, thank you. I'll be right back.
Wow. I wish I could get a deal on a smartphone.
I'll let that.
Find the perfect ride for you with a diverse selection of uniquely crafted Cadillac SUVs and sedans. Drive a new standard with a fresh new lineup from Cadillac. It's the ultimate in iconic luxury. Get 0% APR for 6
that I've had in politics and how discouraged I've been by them my whole life for personal reasons, that I could speak to those people who feel really overwhelmed about this election because of the toxic climate that Trump has created.
One of the things that's happened actually since your piece was posted at Vanity Fair tonight is that
The Washington Post is reporting that the White House was told last year that your father was being used by Russian intelligence, that he was the target of a Russian influence operation. NBC News is reporting tonight that with this sort of October surprise that he has brought to the fore about Joe Biden and Mr. Biden's son, that is now being investigated by federal investigators as a foreign intelligence operation for which your father would be the conduit. I imagine, despite all your political differences with your father, that has to be jarring as his daughter to think about that prospect and to think that he might be wrapped up in that.
Yeah, I mean, the whole experience can be difficult and challenging, but I think it's the same thing that, I mean, not the same, but I think a lot of people can relate to despair over politics. And that's really what I wanted to speak to. I don't have any, I live in LA. I don't have any inside information on anything like that, but I just thought maybe I could be the other October surprise,
Yeah, no, I hear you, and you're not, and you take pains to not, go out on limbs that you didn't grow yourself in terms of speaking from your own experience. That's part of why I was really interested in the sort of diagnosis that you gave in your piece at Vanity Fair about the importance of sycophants, of yes men and yes women, and that being something that makes corruption possible. That it doesn't just take one bad person; it actually takes them being surrounded by people who supplicate their own ethics in order to make it happen. Can you tell us a little bit about how you arrived at that analysis about what went wrong here?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot about fame and power. It's something I've been exposed to for a long time, but it's not something that's specific to politics either. It's something that just happens in the world. But, I'm a filmmaker, so I like to observe why people become how they are. And I think that a lot of Trump's egomania, if you look at him 4 years ago to now, it's gotten exponentially worse. And that's because of that echo chamber of lies.
Your father has made a lot of media appearances over the past year and a half, including a number of them where people who've known him for a long time felt like, or said that they didn't recognize him, or that he had changed, or maybe that there was something going on with your dad's health or with his sort of mental stability. Did you share any of those concerns, or has your father's public profile been sort of what you'd expect? I don't know him personally, and I haven't known him over a long enough period of time to know whether his behavior was sort of weird for him. But have you been concerned about his public behavior at all?
I mean, I've certainly been concerned about his public behavior, not for those reasons per se, but just because he's involved in this whole group of people doing these things. So I think it's less about him specifically and more about this mob mentality that has been created and that he's feeding, unfortunately.
I wondered what actually happens when we call.
All right, brother. Daniel Dale, thank you very much. I look forward to even more, but thank you for keeping on the straight and narrow. All right, we'll be back at midnight. Right now, it's CNN Tonight with D. Lemon.
So let me ask you something, and you can ask me the same question. When was the last time you had a COVID test?
Me, 10 days.
Yeah. So me last Tuesday. So why can't the president remember that if he had a COVID test?
Because he's
lying.
lying.
Debate.
Because he's lying.
How can he not remember someone either drawing blood for people with antibodies or sticking that thing up your nose?
I'm with you. He
going
absolutely
in your brain.
should remember, especially if he wants to say that his opponent is demented and that he's got memory problems and he can't remember what happened last week. But even better, John, and more material is, he said, you'd have to ask the doctor. They could give you a perfect answer. We have. They say your privacy rights won't allow them to answer.
What is happening is that I believe that someone knew, right? Obviously they knew about Hope Hicks, that she was experiencing symptoms, and he did not take the test. Somehow he got around the test for whatever reason and potentially exposed the former vice president, the moderator, and the folks who were there in the hall. The President of the United States. Anyone out there who has had a COVID test in the last, anytime, since this pandemic. You remember the last time you had a COVID test. This is not simply pulling the wool over the American people's eyes.
Right.
This is a wink and a nod. Either he's lying or he has bad memory, or I don't know. I guess the first one is right. He's got to be lying. He has to know when the last time he had a COVID test.
What do you think?
And the result.
What do you think the biggest moment of the night is that you hear on both sides?
Well, to be honest with you, I watched the Biden debate or the Biden town hall, because it was very substantive. I have to tell you, I've heard just about everything that Donald Trump has to say about everything. I'm sorry, and for me, listen, I think the American people can watch who they want. But as someone who covers this every single night of their life, I know what he's going to say. I know what he's going to obfuscate. I know where he's going to point to a shiny object. I know what he's going to lie about. I know what he's going to say about systemic racism. I know he's going to pretend and lie that he did a good job when it comes to the pandemic in this country. I know he's going to give a wink and a nod to racists and bigots and conspiracy theorists like QAnon. No one should be surprised by that. What I wanted to hear is the alternative, the other person who's running, because I've been hearing from him so long.
Right.
That debate was substantive. I got a great answer on the 1994 crime bill that I had not heard before. He actually said it was a mistake. I got great information on COVID. I got great information about what he would do to try to fix systemic racism in this country, and what he would do to try to bring communities of color and police departments together and our elected officials. I'm not sure we heard that. I'm pretty sure we did not hear that from the current president.
No. Look, I thought Biden made some good points. I thought he brought up some good components of what you'd need to have a better plan on COVID, but it didn't sound like he had a plan that would use those components. I'm very sensitive to that. I think the court packing thing makes him seem way too Trumpy in terms of how he's answering the question. With Trump, without question.
You know how I feel about that court packing
thing. I know.
And I'm going to tell you.
We disagree, so we'll leave it alone.
Yeah.
But without question, the President of the United States calling into question the bravery of our SEAL team guys, and all the men and women who spilled blood to find Osama bin Laden
outrageous.
And put him in the ground or in the water.
I got to go,
That's
though.
too far.
I hate to cut you off. Let me tell you, because I have Senator Kamala Harris.
Go ahead. I'll be back at midnight
right now. Thank you, sir. I'll see you soon. This is CNN Tonight. I'm Donald, and here's our breaking news. It's a big night of dueling town halls on competing networks. The President and Joe Biden, each facing questions from voters, but not facing each other. Americans forced to choose which one to watch in real time. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. This was supposed to be a debate. But the president pulled the plug on that when he refused to do it virtually after catching the coronavirus. Joe Biden's running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, as I said just a moment ago, she is here. She's going to weigh on tonight's big moments and her decision to pause in-person campaigning through this weekend after a flight crew member and her communications director tested positive for the virus. But first, I want to get you to...
Of the $2 trillion in his tax cuts went to the top 1/10%. That's what I'm talking about eliminating. If you made sure that people making over 400 grand paid what they did in the Bush administration, 39.6%, you would raise another, it goes up to, let me get the exact number here, about another $92 billion.
I guess, Larry, those were a lot of numbers to remember, 3 numbers. But what of those numbers? He says he's just going to make things fairer. Larry, people like all your friends on Wall Street, they're going to pay their fair share. Warren Buffett will pay his fair share.
I fear my friends on Wall Street are for Biden, but let's put that aside.
I'm getting to that next segment.
Let me make something very clear. If Biden rolls back the Trump tax cuts and deregulation, the biggest losers will be the middle class. The fact is, and the data show this, Census Bureau, labor statistics, Federal Reserve Board, Trump's 3 years, lower taxes and regulations, the benefits went to those who need it the most. The middle class and the lower wage earners. They were the biggest winners. If you roll that back, they will be the biggest losers. And that's why this program, from my friends on the other side of the aisle, does not work. It's stagnation. Trump is growth and prosperity.
Well, Larry, given that Gallup poll that found that 56% of Americans say they're better off than they were 4 years ago, Tonight, a new NBC Wall Street Journal poll found that 50% said the same. I don't know what happened to those 6%. But then that same poll found that 58% say the country is worse off and trails Biden by 11. So where's the disconnect there? Like, how is Trump behind if most people or half people think the country's doing better? What can you say accounts for that?
I don't know. I don't know the innards of this polling mechanism, so it's very difficult. Here's what I know. Family income, living standards, real wages, okay? Huge gains for Potus's first 3 years.
$6,000.
First 3 years, he had about $6,500, 5 times the level increase of the whole 8 years of Biden and Obama. So that tells a story. Okay, look across the board. Poverty, down. Unemployment, record down. African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Asian Americans, women, every class benefited more than ever before and more than the upper end, the top 1% or the top 10%. They had less inequality because of the success of the economic program of President Trump. That is what we hoped would happen. It has happened. And as we get through this pandemic, it will happen again. Yes.
Yeah,
where I got this news in the first place. And so let me reset here also to basically a kind of a version of an equal time proposition. Donald Trump was seen on this network for an hour tonight, and I want to give you an opportunity, just an open opportunity to respond to what you saw in that. And I have to tell you, I didn't see it. So, and I don't know how, I'm sure you split your attention somehow between these things. But what is your campaign's response to what you saw in the Trump town hall tonight?
Well, look, there were 2 town halls tonight, Lawrence. I will tell you, I spent the bulk of my time watching who I believe will be the next president of the United States, Joe Biden. But I will tell you, there were 2 town halls and we saw 2 different things. We saw a leader in Joe Biden. And what I saw from President Trump were more lies, were more skirting of the issues. At one point, President Trump asserted that the DACA program and Dreamers were 2 different things. What I saw in Joe Biden, though, was someone who understood the nuances of the issues that the American people are dealing with, and someone who was so committed to answering the American people's questions. After almost every question he asked, did I answer your question? And then when the town hall was over, Joe Biden stayed to answer more questions from voters who didn't get a chance to ask. And folks were taking out note cards. He stayed for more than 30 minutes. And so I will just have to tell you that this election is a choice, in our opinion. A choice between the vision that Vice President Joe Biden has set forth and the leadership that the American people have seen over the last 4 years from President Trump. And every day over the next 19 days.
Well, things have changed drastically. That crime bill lead.
To health care, to our economy, that they are the best choice to build back better than we were before. Because Donald Trump, in our opinion, has failed the American people.
One of the first questions, I think it was the second question to Joe Biden tonight, was from a Republican voter in Philadelphia concerned about Joe Biden's intention to repeal the Trump tax cuts. I want to listen to some of what Joe Biden had to say about taxes.
I carry this card with me. When I said that.
This is a perfect metaphor for this race tonight. 2 candidates on 2 different channels at the same exact time, completely separate worlds here. In a country where 2 sides are living in different realities, how can you break through that if you become the vice president?
Well, you know, I think that Joe, first of all, I thought he did an incredible job, and he was just, he's who he is, and America got to see it. He answered every question. He wanted to talk more. I don't know if your viewers had a chance to see it. Even after the debate was technically over, he stayed on the stage to answer questions and to have follow-up conversations. That's who Joe is. But one of the things that he talked about, and you played that clip, is about his true and natural and deep desire to unify the country, knowing that the vast majority of us have so much more in common than what separates us. And I think that is part of who Joe is, and that's what's going to make him an incredible president, especially at this time, which is that He's not trying to divide the people. He's not trying to sow hate and division the way Donald Trump is. In fact, he's quite the opposite. He wants to bring people together around both what are our collective dreams and hopes and aspirations for our children and our future, but also around the struggles that everyone is facing now and has been, including the crisis that is about the public health crisis with the coronavirus, the economic crisis that has been the effect of it, the reconciliation in terms of racial justice in America, and also dealing with the climate crisis. And Joe sees, if you will, Don, he sees the Venn diagram of it all. He sees that there are those circles, and maybe people seem that they're a little different. They live in different parts of the country. They may be different age or different race, but that area in the middle, that overlap, is so big, and Joe just wants to grow that around bringing people together around their collective desires.
So let's talk about how you do that then, because that's going to take voting to get you to an office if you want to do that. As we saw in both of these town halls, Senator, there are still some undecided voters out there, as you said, that's maybe part of the middle there. What's your message to Americans who are thinking maybe they don't vote because even though they don't love Trump, they're not sold on Biden either?
Part of it is, Don, look, there's to your point of your first question, there are two clear choices here. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who worked together with President Obama and built the Affordable Care Act, which brought health care to over 20 million people who did not have it, who for the first time created protections for people with pre-existing conditions like diabetes, like high blood pressure, and wants to build on the success that he and President Obama created and build on it by expanding coverage, bringing down the cost of premiums, lowering Medicare age to 60. That's what Joe does. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who is literally in court right now trying to sue to get rid of the Affordable Care Act because he's got this weird obsession with trying to undo whatever Barack Obama and Joe Biden created. So there are so many clear differences between the two of them. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who says we need to invest in the American worker and American infrastructure. Joe is supported by labor. And why? Because he will grow good-paying union jobs, and he honors the importance of collective bargaining, and also what we need to do, build back up our roads and our bridges and invest in renewable energy. He talked about that tonight. Yeah. Donald Trump, he talked about an infrastructure plan that never took place. He has passed a tax bill benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America. Meanwhile, over 30 million people in our country signed up for unemployment in just the last several months.
Well, let's talk about why that is. And I want to be respectful of the time, because we don't have as long as I want. I'd like to go all 2 hours that I have on the air tonight to go with you. But I want to talk about this because this is very important. This is close to you. Two people in your campaign's orbit tested positive, including your communications director. The president brought it up tonight when he was asked about where he might have gotten COVID. Listen to this.
No, I don't know where it came from, and you don't know where it came from, and the doctors don't know where it came from. But as the president, I have to be out there. I also know...
Well, there's no one that says you can't be out there, but it's just about wearing masks and having, for example, your rallies. Your rallies don't require masks.
Oh, no. I mean, let's see Kamala. She's got people now that people have it, and I'm not blaming her. I'm not saying, oh, she did a terrible thing. As president, I have to be out there. I can't be in a basement.
So he is using your circumstance to make the point that this could happen to anyone, that despite taking precautions, your campaign was hit as well. What is your response to him?
My response is, with due respect and being polite, that he's just incorrect. And the reality of it is that, first of all, his approach to this issue is something the American public are suffering from. For example, what we did is we have had, and he mocked Joe Biden in their debate about wearing masks and protocols that say, we understand, love thy neighbor, wear your mask. We have had protocols that have been about saying that we need to have social distancing. We're not going to bring large crowds together because we don't want people to get sick as they exercise their rights in our democracy. On the other hand, you have a Donald Trump who has overlooked all of that when he had information since January about how serious this was, and he did not tell the American people. So again, you have clear contrast. You want to talk about the difference between the two choices people have in just 19 days, but people are voting right now, by the way. The choice is Joe Biden, who has been saying since March, we need to have a national plan for testing, for treatment, for contact tracing, and when God willing we get that vaccine as soon as possible, for distribution of the vaccine, taking into account things like racial disparities and making sure it's free.
I'm glad you mentioned the vaccines, and before I get to it, that's my next question, but you have tested negative, right? And you've been tested?
Yes, many times.
Many times, okay.
Yeah, I was last exposed to the folks you mentioned 7 days ago. I've had multiple tests since. Okay. I've come up negative. They are all doing well, I'm happy to say, and yeah, and this is where we are.
Great. Okay, so listen, you mentioned vaccines. At the Biden town hall, he was asked.
The area where we live, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia, it's been very tough.
You know, suburban voters, suburban moms are concerned about this. In fact, the desire for more lockdowns and stricter controls is pretty much confined to urban areas and Democratic urban voters. Having said that, we're talking about issues, we're only talking about moving a few voters here and there. You said at the open, 14% of voters are uncommitted. You know, these might be voters who say they're voting for a libertarian now, or who might change their mind on one of the major party candidates. It comes in the context of Joe Biden is ahead narrowly in my state polls and the national polling we're seeing. But a shift of a couple of points can move this right back into toss-up category, and this is an issue that might do it and that most pundits will miss.
Scott, great to see you tonight. Thank you for joining us. We have a lot more reaction to tonight's town hall, so stay with us. Plus, the revelations surrounding the Bidens, well, their latest get-rich-quick scheme reveals a very uncomfortable truth. The left gets rich off America's misery. My angle explains in moments.
Would expect the Justice Department to run in a Biden administration.